Hey everybody, as promised, we have the Pro Tour number 2 mat to give away. Now there's a pretty special story behind this one, and I wanted to make sure that I do very much give it out to someone in the community. So while I tell this story, please leave a comment in the description of this video for your chance to win this sucker. And after Pro Tour 3, let's say, I will announce the winner and ship this right out to you, no matter where you are in the world. So leave that comment below. Now, this mat is actually the replacement Ivophidia mat that LSS gifted to me when, if you remember so long ago, I lost my luggage coming back from Pro Tour Lille. So I feel like this truly is not mine to keep, since my bag was eventually rediscovered and returned to me. So I want to make sure it goes back to someone else in the community to keep on giving that gift that LSS once first gave to me in my hour of need. So hopefully none of you lose your luggage coming back from Pro Tour number 3. That was a nightmare. But for now, best of luck with your chance to win this one. Comment below. Top 4 is brought to you by Fabrec.gg, a now mainstay name in the Flesh and Blood community. They are the proud sponsors of not only this round, but also the card guys who you can find on YouTube and at any large event. Their website works with other community sites to help Flesh and Blood grow overall, particularly with February and Talishar to generate the most useful and up-to-date analysis. And they have a lot more planned, including articles and deeper dives into card analytics that are coming soon. Check it out now at Fabrec.gg.
All right, welcome back everyone to the top 8 of this Battle Hardened. We are now looking at the top 4 match. We have another Oldhim here, this time piloted by Trent, against Brodie Spurlock on his Azalea, which, Michael, you have some experience against Brodie on his Azalea at the Chicago Brawl, so it'll be very exciting to hear your insight here during this match. But before that, let's just quickly go into the key cards for this matchup. So Azalea, being a ranger, doesn't have a weapon, which means she's very prone to being fatigued. So she needs to look at how she can penetrate Oldhim's defenses. And one of those key cards is Drill Shot. Getting them on the rampart early in the game is something Brodie is going to try to do to really cripple Oldhim's defenses for the rest of the game. The other thing is Seek and Destroy. If Brodie is able to land this, and maybe even something like a Lace with Inertia to get Oldhim off in Arsenal, that really cripples the Crown of Seeds effectiveness, which in turn cripples the rampart effectiveness for that turn, because then you don't really want to pitch a whole card just for your rampart. On the Oldhim side, they have tall D reacts like Staunch Response. That'll help them stop Azalea's on hits getting through, and also cards like Crown of Seeds and Rampart, which let them block without putting cards on the combat chain, allowing them to fatigue out the Azalea and eventually just wear them down with the trusty hammer.
Yeah, and more than just not spending cards in their deck when they're blocking it, kind of like makes it easier for Oldhim to block these big dominate effects. So if Azalea attacks for 8 dominate and Oldhim doesn't have a defense reaction, he can still block for 3 and then pitch a blue to activate Crown and block with Rampart to cover up 5 instead of just being able to cover up 3.
Absolutely. Rampart and Crown together is 2 extra points of value on the Dominator effect. And once you add on Oldhim's Earth React, that is 4 points of value that Oldhim can kind of always just block without putting any cards in the chain. And we aren't even getting into armor or D reacts or instants like Oasis Respite and Peace of Mind.
I'm so troll.
Yeah, definitely. So Oldhim has some very strong defensive capabilities, so we'll have to see if Brodie can kind of string together enough big attacks to get through them all before he runs out of cards in deck.
Absolutely. So now over here, Trent was the higher seed, so he chose to go first here. What do you think of this decision for Oldhim to go first in this matchup?
When your game plan into Azalea is just the fatiguer from the start, it does make sense. You get to play a big attack and take either some life points or a couple cards out of your opponent's deck. And then you also get to have an arc, which means you're more likely to be able to cover up the first big attack Brodie sent. If you choose to go second and Azalea activates her ability and hits an arrow on the turn and gets in for dominate and you don't have that defense reaction, you can just end up taking like a decent amount of damage on the first turn before you even get a chance to set up.
Definitely. So it's like a double-edged sword. You get cards out of the deck and you sort of set up your arsenal to turn on the Crown and the Rampart. I really like that. So it looks like Trent just came in with a blue Thunderquake for 8 and Brodie blocked out with 2 cards it looked like and should leak some. We'll probably see the life counters get updated soon. Blocking with 2 buffs there, a Seek and Destroy and a Deadeye, both, pretty valuable tools. We talked about Seek and Destroy earlier, but Deadeye as well, just a way for Brodie to go tall, which is very important in this matchup.
Yeah, definitely important. We'll It looked like his hand might not have had an arrow to load. I saw a codex was also there, so it kind of makes sense to block with your pumps if you don't have an arrow, but
right.
It's not really what Brodie wants to be happening on the first turn, losing 2 valuable pump spells.
Absolutely, and also starting your turn with a knock. I know knock is something that can get Azalea out of tricky spots like this when you don't have an arrow, but it's still not a card they're very happy to play, because you are going down a card effectively, because it puts it on top of your deck instead of, in your hand. Ooh, looks like the video just skipped a little, and we may have progressed one turn cycle.
This is 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, Brodie's tuning counter is at 2, so we did progress 1 turn cycle. Looks like Trent managed to block out that drill shot that came in. There's a sink below in his graveyard, so it looks like he just blocked it out totally fine. And we're back to Brodie's turn. He probably took damage from a Titan's Fist because he's at 36 now, and started the turn with a Rabble. So let's move on from here. Apologies for the technical difficulties.
Yeah, so it looks like the Rabble was just blocked out. I think this means it revealed a yellow if it was blocked by a single card.
Yep, and looking at what Brodie just drew up, he drew a Rain Raises. That was the first card, so it looks like the Rabble did reveal a Rain Raises, which just means Trent knows that there's a Rain Raises coming, which can be pretty useful, if Brodie is trying to land the drill shot to try and hit that rampart. Trent knows of that combat trick that Brodie has, so he can play around it. But of course, given that all Brodie did was a Rabble, Trent is following up with a Command and Conquer. Obviously, historically a pretty good card against ranges, although has lost some value nowadays that they have all these 3 blocks. Even some of the pumps like Deadeye and Melting Point block 3 as well.
Yeah, it's still great. It's still going to require 2 cards from Brodie's hand, so he'll be pretty unlikely to present something that Trent won't be able to block with only 3 cards. So
absolutely,
even though it is pretty easy to block out.
And 1 floating with a Tunic up, although, we all know what this represents, although we wouldn't even need the Tunic at this point because Trent does have excess cards to represent that pummel over here.
Yeah, this is kind of a very classic Oldhim combination where you play you pitch your blue, you play your Command and Conquer, have Tunic on 3 with the resource floating. So I don't know if Trent's on pummels here, but if he is, a pummel would be pretty rough for Brodie.
Looks like Trent is activating the crown here in the reaction step, maybe fishing for that pummel, if he does have one. Looks like he didn't draw. He drew into a sink below, though, that he could arsenal, so he's definitely very happy to find that.
Cross wrap. Opt. Put that to the bottom.
His arsenal, even if he doesn't have pummels in the deck, if his arsenal is not a card he's particularly happy to have there, it makes sense to just crown and dig towards defensive tools that you're looking for.
Absolutely. And going back to Brodie's turn, looks like he started his turn with an Opt and showing a Premeditate. And then he's just going to activate Azalea, and let's see whether he puts an arrow. He puts in a Ravenous Rabble, so instead of putting an arrow, and it looks like he has a Lace with Bloodrot and a Rain Raises in his hand, so a bit of a break from Brodie here. That was a premeditated arsenal. 2 more arrow buffs in hand, but no arrow to use them with.
Yeah, this is a pretty unfortunate draw. Trent's just going to be able to easily block out the Rabble.
Yep.
And probably won't. And probably will have several cards left to come back with something.
Yep, and Brodie did reveal yet another buff off the top, which was the Lace with Inertia. So he makes a very proactive play here to pitch to Death Dealer, just to get an extra buff out of his hand to increase odds of him drawing an arrow. And it's exactly sort of subpar turns like that, which, Brodie was sort of priced into from that break that allows Trent to, send back offensive stuff without needing to have taken damage to do so. Sending another CNC representing a pummel again.
Yeah, the start of this game has gone pretty poorly for Brodie, so hopefully he's able to pitch stack some of these cards together. We saw him pitch a Rain Razors last turn. Maybe he can combine that with some Bolin shots or something to a pretty strong second cycle. But for now, he's in trouble with this Command and Conquer coming in. Once again, going to take 2 cards to block it out, or he'll just have to lose his arsenal if he lets it hit.
Absolutely. And that is the one-off Endless Arrow in his deck, I believe, which I believe that is some tech that some Azaleas have brought in to combat the full Fatigue Oldhims. which at this point the Trent has sort of shown his hand here, and like Brodie knows this isn't a full fatigue Oldhim, so maybe that's why he's elected to let go of the Endless Arrow and say, I'm not going to need that this matchup, or at least, or maybe he just feels way too far behind to be able to try and set that up.
Yeah. It does help that he has access to 3 Codex of Frailty. So even if he does block with the Endless Arrow or gets blocked out, he can still use Codex to bring it back and then activate Azalea to put it back on the bottom of his deck to find it later.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, I forgot about that. That's a very good point. Yeah, so Endless Arrow in the graveyard isn't actually it's gone forever sort of thing. And it looks like Brodie's luck hasn't really improved. He did use 2 arrows to block that CNC, to be fair, but now it looks like he's stuck on a bunch of buffs again.
Yeah, with CNC coming in for 6, he kind of, it doesn't look like either of his pumps would block for 3, so he had to block with the 2 arrows if he wanted to keep his arsenal. And with Skullbone Crosswrap and Read the Glide Path, that's 2 extra looks at the top card of your deck to try to find an arrow to Azalea into. It's just very unfortunate that it looks like both of them missed.
Yep. So I believe this is a blind Azalea because he opted both to the bottom and found yet another buff. Brodie's deck just not helping here at this point. And yeah, he just passes the turn after playing that Read the Glide Path.
Yeah, and this is kind of the threat that Oldhim, or this kind of shows the threat that Oldhim has over Azalea, because Oldhim's so happy to just block out your attacks and is very capable of blocking with several cards to just cover up big attacks. Brodie's felt kind of forced to go for this dominate on all these arrows, where he's like giving up things to make sure he can dominate and get this evasion to try to push through, but it just hasn't been panning out for him so far.
Yeah, so that being said, what are your thoughts on potentially letting maybe one of these CNCs just hit and just losing an arsenal so that you can actually send something? Or is that just not worth it because you don't get to look from cross-wrap, so your chance to dominate just gets a lot less likely?
Yeah, that's basically the problem with letting the Command and Conquer hit is without cross-trap, you just don't really have a way to set up guaranteed dominate. You can just load an arrow and blind Azalea and hope, but then if you miss and hit a pump, your turn is completely gone anyway. So it's just a really rough spot to be in.
Absolutely. But to be fair, I mean, at least to Brodie's fortune here, this is the last Command and Conquer. You won't need to worry about any more after this. No Codex of Frailty on Oldhim's side for him to recur threats like that. So this time Brodie does elect to just take that CNC. And let's see what he's able to follow up with.
Yeah, no Codex of Frailty on Oldhim's side, but he can bring them back from Brodie's Codex of Frailties if he wants to.
Yes, of course. Especially with the Crown of Seeds, he gets to empty his arsenal in response to a Codex and put the CNC back in.
Tunic.
Right, looks like Brodie is using Tunic to activate that dealer. Yeah, probably one of the most efficient uses of the Tunic counter on Brodie's side. You know, Tunic to draw a card, I've heard that's pretty good. It kind of rivals a Tunic to Crown of Seeds on Trent's side.
Yeah, it's... I would say it's even better than using Tunic for Crown of Seeds. Just Death Dealer, well, it doesn't let him attack for damage. It is a very powerful ability of just spending basically 1 resource to draw a card.
Definitely. If we value a card at +3, as a lot of the buffs in Brodie's deck are, then, you know, that Death Deal activation was basically +3 damage. Tuning for +3 damage. And also, Brodie did load in a Remorseless. Now, this card isn't exactly textless against Oldhim, because it does have that clause saying that it was loaded face up. It means defense reactions can't be played from Arsenal. This chain link could be useful. If Trent, you know, has one of those tall defense reactions like Staunch Response, or even like Sink Below in his arsenal.
Yeah, and I think we saw Trent put a Sink Below in his arsenal recently. I don't think it's moved. Last turn he passed with a card in hand and didn't even activate Crown of Seeds, so yeah. I think it's still the Sink Below sitting down there.
I think so too. I mean, also Brodie's previous turns haven't exactly warranted the use of a Sink Below. So this Remorseless is, you know, going to be getting something.
Okay, so I gave it an
yeah, it looks like he activated Azalea and put an aim counter on this Remorseless. Now, of course, the aim counter, the Remorseless itself doesn't care about it, but Brodie is playing a Deadeye here, which means that this Remorseless, if it hits, because it has that aim counter, is going to allow Brodie to look at Trent's hand and discard a card from it.
So, Brodie Azalea a Remorseless into another Remorseless, right?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, this hit on the Azalea is huge for Brodie with the Remorseless stopping defense reaction from Arsenal, and then this is coming in for 15 dominate. It looks like
15 dominate with basically all the on hits you could ever want. Look at your card, look at your hand, discard a card, give you a Blood Rod, give you an Inertia, which means Oldhim will be off an Arsenal. Unless he finds a peace of mind and manages to create himself a Ponder here.
Yeah.
So very, very strong turn by Brodie here. That was, this time the luck has favored him. That was a blind Azalea into the Remorseless. So, finally some luck is going Brodie's way here.
Yeah, things weren't going well. He kind of needed to get lucky here to have a good turn, and it pays off with the finding a red arrow to dominate for so much.
Absolutely. So on Trent's side, he does have the Crown of Seeds prevention floating, and he's putting Rampart in front of it. Remember, we talked about this earlier. So that is 2 points that he's blocking without even putting any cards on combat chain for the dominate. And look at that, a red staunch response. It looks like he paid the extra cost on staunch as well to make it block. How much does it block after it's been pumped?
It blocks 10 after it's been pumped. 10?
Okay, it blocks 10. And more importantly, it means a Deadeye on it actually doesn't matter because his hand is empty because of how much he paid for it.
Yep. And it looks like this Remorseless is actually for 14. 5 base plus 3 times is 14. So he's only going to take, I think, 2 damage here with the Crown and the Rampart each blocking 1 and the Staunch blocking 10. So 2 damage and then a Blood Rot will deal 2 more.
Yeah. So Brodie leaks 4 of that, and it kind of reminds me of that quote from Infinity War, all that for a drop of blood. That was a blind Azalea with 3 pumps, Remorseless, one of the better arrows you can get to get over defenses, and he leaks 4 damage. He does get Oldhim off an Arsenal, though, so that can be pretty big and could lead to more effects like this leaking through.
Yeah, without an Arsenal, the Dominate's going to be a lot more effective. He can't block with a card from hand and play a defense reaction from Arsenal, for example, and he can't activate Crown of Seeds without an Arsenal. So there is a lot of potential to get some damage through now that Trent is off the Arsenal, but he really needs his hands to line up well.
Looking at Brodie's hand here, he does have a Widowmaker in his hand. Now, I know that is one of the cards that Azalea players are a little, in contention about. Some people like it, some people really don't like it. What are your thoughts of this card being included in an Azalea list for a matchup like this?
Yeah, so it basically only has the text of defense reactions can't be played on its chain link, because the other line of it getting +3 if it's blocked by 2 or less than 2 cards, that'll never come up, because the Oldhim can just block with the Crown of Seeds, block with the Rampart, and that just counts as 2 cards. They only need 1 if they're blocking with a card from hand, which most of the time they're going to do. So, but the defense reactions can't be played can be very impactful, especially if you find an Oldhim that has multiple defense reactions they were looking to play, especially red ones that they can't really use any other way. So it is a pretty underrated arrow at being a red 1 for 4, and you really need to get a lot of value out of the defense reactions can't be played clause on it for it to be worth it. But sometimes it does line up really well, and it can be pretty powerful when it does.
And looking at Brodie's turn here, he loads a Spire Snapping. Of course, another one of those cards that's very helpful for him to, secure those dominates that we see him trying to do this whole game. Unfortunately for him, again, he just saw 2 buffs off the top there. I believe I saw Rain Raises and another red pump spell. So he just fires off this blue Spire Snapping, not even bothering to buff it at all, which I think is a very heads-up play by him, because every time you buff and, you don't leak any damage, that's more cards out of your deck than simply just that, 1 attack, because you also lost your buffs.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Looks like Trent is following up with a mulch, so good for Brodie that, Trent didn't have a great follow-up. We did see all the previous times Brodie had subpar turns, Trent had CNCs to back them up. But this time it's just an unfused mulch, I believe, so just 6 vanilla damage.
Yeah, and notably, Trent's last card is probably a red of some sort that he wants to Arsenal here. We see him pitching a Staunch Response, which is a card that I think he would prioritize arsenaling pretty highly. And also, if he kept a hand of 3 blues and this Pulverize and just took the 3 damage, he could have set the Pulverize back as well. So probably a red here as his last card.
Absolutely. That's a great observation. Could probably be maybe one of those red 0 for 4 defense reactions. We've seen Sync from him. I'm not sure whether we've seen Fate for Scenes yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that Trent is running, or even one of those instants that we talked about earlier, like Oasis, Respite, or Peace of Mind.
Tunic to 2.
Yeah. With the Command and Conquerors gone and at least one Pulverized down, there aren't a lot of offensive reds left in the deck, probably, unless there are pummels lurking around. But most likely it's just something defensive.
Yeah, and critically, we haven't seen any Spinals. I believe Spinals should still be in the deck, but yeah, we haven't seen those either, so it could be that.
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely a possibility. I think if it was a Spinal, though, it's pretty likely Trump just pitched the 2 blues to cast a Spinal rather than playing the Mulch and Arsenaling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So looks like Brodie's starting his turn with the cross wrap, opting, and then playing his buff from Arsenal. So it does seem like Brodie is favoring this sort of style in his matchup where he arsenals his buffs so that he can play them out and yeah, and get his Death Dealer draw and then Azalea into an arrow.
Yeah, I think if he didn't have Spire Sniping, he might not be playing out the buffs. He might just be looking to activate Skullbone Cross Wrap and then Azalea to the bottom. But because he keeps drawing Spire Snipings, he's pretty happy to just play it out and then use Spire Sniping to set up the Azalea activation.
Absolutely, and that's one of those sort of, masteries of the hero where you realize when it's optimal for you to arsenal your buff versus when it's optimal for you to arsenal an arrow. Because every turn you aren't activating Death Dealer because you already had an arrow at the beginning of your turn is a turn that you're losing out value. And in a matchup like this, you do need to maximize that efficiency.
You really need to get a lot of value out of your cards.
So,
but
yep.
I was going to say, we saw a Death Dealer activation here, and Brodie's going to end his turn with 2 cards in hand, assuming neither of them are Rain Racer that he wants to play out to get 2 extra damage through. So the Death Dealer draw, it doesn't actually matter every single time it happens. If you end up with multiple arrows, then sometimes you just can't use your whole hand.
Exactly, and that is one of the tensions that Azalea does face, a little bit like Runeblade in that sense, where they have the tension of they need non-attacks and attacks, but then sometimes they have too many of one, and that can be annoying. So we saw earlier in this game, Brodie had too many buffs and no arrows, and now it's sort of like the opposite, where he had too many arrows in hand and couldn't use all of them. Now, we do see this Widowmaker coming out, though, so let's see whether, this little trick up his sleeve pays off for him, turning off all of Trent's defense reactions. And this does have Dominate, because it was Azalea in.
Yeah, so it's going to be for 10 Dominate. And it looks like Trent might actually be able to cover almost all this up with the Crown and the Rampart blocking 2, the Oasis covering up 4 more, then a 3 block here. That would be blocking 9 of the 10 damage.
Yep, and he could use Armor to block last, or even just an Earth React.
9.
Looks like...
Go to 35?
Huh, is our math off? Because, oh no, he's taking 1 and he's allowing... I see, he's saying that, you know what, you have 2 cards remaining, I don't care if you have the Ponder, I'm just going to save my card, my Earth React and my Armor piece, because the Ponder doesn't matter, there's no other on-hit on this I need to care about.
It is my end phase and I have a 4-card hand. Goofy.
And there was another one of Brodie's bigger tools in the matchup, that that Widowmaker. He's kind of relying on that to push damage through by turning off the defense reactions, but Trent had the Oasis there, so just its ability didn't really matter very much.
Yep, Oldhim once again just showing us how difficult it is to just leak damage into him. Now, there is one very curious thing. Trent pitched an Eye of Ophidia just now to activate his Crown of Seeds. What are your thoughts on that card in Oldhim? Is it to see what you draw off Crown of Seeds?
That's actually a card that I was really surprised to see there. I remember back in the Starvo days, you would see it because you would pitch it to activate Crown of Seeds, then you could opt to try to set up the last element you needed for your Starvo activation. But Oldhim doesn't really have anything like that. So I guess you can opt to try to set up the right defensive card that you want to draw. But it is a card I'm kind of surprised to see.
Definitely. Also, oh my god, Michael, we don't talk about that hero.
No, flashbacks.
So looks like Brodie is taking a while to decide what he wants to arsenal. Looks like he has 2 buffs and 2 arrows in his hand. We do know those 2 arrows are definitely there since, you know, he left 2 arrows in hand. When he sent the Widowmaker, looks like he drew a melting point and I believe another buff I can't quite see. I think it's 2 melting points actually. Yep.
Yeah. So Sam's probably 3 reds right now and the bolt and shot. So, and he kind of wants to get the bolt and shot to the bottom with this Rain Razors to combo a turn of Rain Razors and bolt and shot together. So I would be surprised to see him not keep the bolt and shot in his hand to potentially pitch it on his next turn.
So there are a couple of ways Azalea can send a card to the bottom, right? If the Bolt and Shot is an arsenal, you could Azalea it to the bottom as well. Or, I guess, pitch on your turn. Of course, Azaleaing it to the bottom, you're sort of gambling that you Azalea into an arrow to, you know, get the Dominate effect. But, you know, Azalea does have, you know, multiple ways to get a card to the bottom of the deck, which is really interesting when you look at it from a pitch stacking sort of perspective.
Yeah, that's true. And it looks like Brodie went ahead and arsenaled the Widowmaker here. So there is some risk here. If he wants to
I'll leave it on top.
if he wants to dominate a card, he has to Azalea here. And then if there wasn't an arrow to Azalea the Widowmaker into, he wouldn't really be able to pitch the bolt and shot and do something productive on the turn because the bolt and shot would be his only remaining arrow. Fortunately, he just finds an infecting shot on top and doesn't have to worry about it.
True, and oh, that was a blue bolt and shot. I actually thought it was a red when I first looked at it. And he does pitch to give it the aim counter from Crow's Nest, since the infecting shot did come from the top of his deck. Now, this is another massive dominated arrow. Of course, the melting point on hit doesn't matter against someone like Oldhim. His weapon does not have 1 attack. But the Lace with Inertia is another thing Brodie's pretty happy to get onto a massive dominated arrow like this.
Yeah, and 17 damage dominate. I don't think Oldhim's going to be able to cover up all of this. So
Famous last
get some
words.
damage through that inertia token.
Double staunch for smart.
I could be wrong. Yeah, that is possible. Staunch from hand and staunch from arsenal would cover up quite a bit of it, and he does have the rampart as well.
Yeah,
but 17 is a lot.
Very unlikely, but yeah. So likely Trent is going to find himself with inertia and a blood rot at the end of his turn. Brodie finally leaking maybe a little more damage through. We are at turn 9 though, so we're about, 60% of the way through the deck. But in terms of life totals, not quite that much for Brodie. So I have to say, I think the early bricks for Brodie kind of have put him in a bit of a rough spot out here.
Trigger, inertia,
Yeah, definitely.
all the good ones. Yeah.
So looks like Trent went ahead and leaked 6 there.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's about as much as Brodie could probably hope for on something like this. Of course, the red, there was a blue staunch he actually paid into, not the red. So Trent leaked 6. I mean, we might just see him pitch to Blood Rot here. There we go. Pitch to Blood Rot before the inertia triggers and save himself another 2 life.
Yeah, I think if he had the option, he probably would have chosen to block with the Terra Center to prevent 3 damage rather than 2. But because of the dominate, he didn't really have that choice.
Of course. So, we're back to Brodie. Now, tempo-wise, tempo is on Brodie's side, but this matchup definitely isn't really about who has the tempo. It seems like it's more about threats left in deck on the Rangers side. So, as we talked about earlier, about 2/3 of the way through Brodie's deck and only about 1/3 of the way through Oldhim's life total. So, we're going to see whether Oldhim can, whether Brodie can, cobble something together. Now, we talked about this in the top 8. In the top 8 matchup where we had in Missouri against an Oldhim. Brodie hasn't used a Codex yet, and we saw how effective that can be at, chipping through Oldhim a decent amount on those Codex turns. So, let's see what he can capitalize on that moving forward.
Yeah, a big Codex turn would be helpful. I think Codex is a little bit worse in Azalea than it is in Uzuri, which isn't saying that it's like not very, very good or anything, but he doesn't have something like Death Touch where he can just 1 card 6 with a pretty important on hit after the Codex. His best things are usually 1 card 5s like Infecting Shot.
Definitely, and at the same time, his buffs don't also buff Death Touch. A lot of the buffs that he's running, like the Laces and the Seek and Destroy, only buff arrow attacks. So, oh, I guess no, he's not running Death Touch, so we're fine. He can still play a bunch of buffs and Codex into a big arrow. So that's still okay. Now it does look like he did draw too many arrows in that hand. I saw a knock and 3 arrows, and now he Death Dealer into an E-Strike. So he's still able to use his hand here, but not in a way to get a dominate effect off. So I wonder if he might just do what he was doing previously, where try and send as little as possible to conserve threat density and just hope for a better hand.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate here that the turn that Oldhim's off an Arsenal, Brodie didn't draw any pumps. So he drew knock, so he can guaranteed get an arrow with dominate this turn if he wants, but he has no pumps at all to pump it up.
Yeah, at most he can, maybe get an aim counter on something like a red infecting shot, but that is still pretty trivial for Oldhim to block even without an Arsenal. So. Right, so it looks like Brodie's lining up that E-Strike here. And the other thing about this play is that, if he wants to conserve threats in deck, we might see him just go opt for the +2 over here and keep that Bolton shot in his arsenal and not fire it. But because it's face up, he can't even, use the cross trap on the next turn to opt because it's already face up. So it's another tricky position for Brodie. Of course, if he draws into a pump, he could just pump and then send the Bolton shot and keep his Death Dealer usage. But he's opting to do the go again on the E-Strike here.
The +2 line does kind of make sense. You'd get 2 cards out of Trent's hand, probably blocking it, and then you wouldn't face much on the return, just probably a Titan's Fist for 4. And you get to either block with a card and play back a 3-card hand plus an arsenal, or just take it off your hand's very good. And you'd be in reasonable shape, but maybe Brodie thinks he can do something better with this hand, where go again into maybe a knock line.
Oh, looks like that is what he's opting to do. So Trent still with 3 cards in hand. All he used was a Fate Foreseen on that E-Strike and just leaked 1. So if there's an Earth card in there or another D-React, it's unlikely that Brodie will be able to leak anything through a dominated arrow, although he might just try and find a buff and just set up a buff and have a big turn next turn. Oh, wait, no, so, what am I saying? No, you can't find a buff from knock, never mind.
Yeah, knock only gets arrows. So even though Brodie still has a decent amount of cards left in his deck, now that he's shuffling, his arrow to pump ratios are going to be a little off, because in the first cycle, most of his turns, he'd play multiple pumps and only play 1 arrow. So now his deck is going to be more arrow dense and less pump dense. So he's going to have trouble kind of putting together the big dominated arrow turns. It'll be very easy for him to find arrows to dominate, but it'll be harder to pump them up to meaningful amounts of damage.
At the same time, I'm wondering whether his decision to shuffle his deck here is maybe partly to sort of unbrick the pitch stack he had from the first few turns of the game, where he was just pitching a bunch of buffs next to each other because that's all he was drawing. So that could potentially be a secondary reason why he's choosing to shuffle his deck here.
Azalea?
So the estimated shot's only going to be 4 with an aim counter, but the aim counter gives it piercing, which means that Trent can't really block this very easily with the equipment. He kind of just needs another defense reaction or something to cover up 4 damage, because he can't block with a 3 block in the rampart and cover it up.
Yeah, an Earth React would definitely be very helpful for him here. Or the Ironhide, because the piercing just gives a +1, and Ironhide, blocks for 2. So it looks like that's what he's lining up, but yeah, so it looks like he doesn't have the Earth card, because if he had it, he probably would have just sent the Earth card here as the Earth React.
Yeah, so this drill shot actually getting the Ironhide legs out of Trent means it was pretty good for Brodie to take this line that he took, where he's getting rid of the shoes.
Yep.
Definitely. Now Trent is down to just the 1 last block on Crater Fist, and I suppose the 1 last block on Tunic, but that's not exactly something he'd be very happy to give up. But yeah, that was a small win for Brodie, and let's see if we can capitalize on Trent, losing his shoes on a relatively subpar attack, like a 4 damage drill shot with an aim counter on it.
Yeah.
So looking at Brodie's hand here, I believe I see a Lace with Blood Rot, Rain Razors, Bolton Shot, and an Infecting Shot. So now without the cross wrap, though, we talked about this earlier, it's a little difficult for him to dominate something. And we know the way he's been playing, he rarely wants to send anything if it's not dominated. So he might opt for a blind Azalea again, as he's been doing.
Yeah, I think we'll see that here, especially after we see him load the Bolton shot. Trying to keep the Bolton shots plus the Rain Razors together is, again, one of the very powerful things Azalea can do. Have a turn where she plays Rain Razors and multiple Bolton shots can pressure a lot of damage.
Yep, and he did just shuffle his deck, so, you know, this is basically him restarting his pitch deck over here, so... Yep, we're probably going to see that Bolton shot come back later as with the Rain Razors, as you are pointing out. Now, it does look like he Azalea'd into a buff, so with arrows having the, you know, the stipulation that can only be played from Arsenal, this does look like it's going to be the end of Brodie's turn, and yes, he just passes it over.
Yeah, he did have one way to keep his turn from ending there. He could have played out the melting pot and then used bullseye bracers to fire an arrow that turn, but firing an arrow without dominate isn't really what he's looking to do. He's really just trying to dominate attacks, and he didn't have that option available.
Yep, and it looks like Trent coming in with a chokeslam here, which actually has a very, very relevant crush effect against Azalea, saying that if it deals 4 or more damage, then Azalea's attacks can't gain power on their turn, and that is how Azalea, you know, sends massive arrows, by putting a bunch of buffs on them. So this just yet another card in Trent's list that's just forcing cards out of Brodie's hand when he really, really doesn't want to be losing cards anymore.
And this looks like the red, right?
It looks like the blue to me.
Okay, if it's blue, then Brodie can just block with 1 card and stop the on hit.
Yep.
If it's red, that would be really, really bad because it would take 2 full cards to prevent the on hit from happening, or the crush effect.
Yeah, I think based on the card pop-up on the bottom right as well, I'm just going to assume that it's a blue one. And we can see how it is from Brodie's block. It does look like he has a Spire Sniping and a Widowmaker in his hand. Ooh, he's blocking with 2 cards, so probably the red one then.
Yep.
Wait, but he didn't leak anything. So was the blue?
Or maybe there just was no way to use the rest of his hand if it was a blue. Once he blocks with 1 card, I see a blue Spire Sniping, and I'm not sure what the other card is.
I think
you said Lace with Blood Rot.
Yeah, I think it's a Lace with Blood Rot.
So if he blocked with a single card, it would be really hard to play the Melting Point and load the Spire Sniping, which is the card he wants to load to set up his Azalea flip.
Yep, and Brodie just passed. He just drew back up to 4 and said, "You go, Trent." And Trent, having a subpar turn, which Brodie is definitely very happy to see about, finally a card that is really just vanilla damage.
Yep.
Although I say that, and then, you know, we might get surprised with a random pummel out of nowhere, forcing a card out of Brodie's hand. But for now, this is just... is that a Yellow Autumn's Touch? I think it might be the yellow one, just 5 vanilla damage. Oh, it was 6. Brody took 6. Yeah, it was a yellow one. And, yep, and followed by Remembrance.
Yeah, you mentioned the last of the CNCs, and here we see 3 shuffled back into Trent's deck.
Don't even need those codexes of frailty from Brodie's side to get them back. Trent was prepared with the Remembrance. Well, it does look like Brodie has been able to set up a reasonably strong turn here. We talked about the blue Spire Snapping along with his Melting Point buff, so, you know, he could leak some damage in at this point, but Oldhim still has 3/4 of his life.
Yeah, and I believe the last card in Trent's hand that he kept there was a red Oasis Respite, so even if Brodie dominates a big arrow here, Trent should be able to cover up a lot of it.
Absolutely, especially with a Tunic counter up. Now, of course, he might just opt to Crown Rampart and have the one floating to Oasis, but in the case of the Arsenal's, the 0-cost D-React, you definitely see that Tunic being very relevant here to help cast that Oasis. So Brodie's looking through his graveyard here, and I feel like that's a bit of a telltale sign. When you see the Ranger looking through a graveyard, it's like, do they have the Codex in hand? Looks like he doesn't, but he is probably expecting to see them soon.
Yeah, it could also be that he's trying to think of what he has left to get in the deck with knocks. So if he's looking through his graveyard, he can figure out what cards are not left in his deck, so he can figure out what options he could knock for.
Absolutely, and probably like a little similarly with the Spire Sapling, what are the potential red arrows he could even hit off this Spire Sniping? Right, so it looks like it's going to activate the Melting Point, and you called it, Michael. It's going to Death Deal and that Spire Sniping and set up a big turn.
Trigger.
So he does draw into another buff there. I believe I see a Lace, Rain Razors, and I want to say a Seek and Destroy.
So assuming one of these cards is an arrow on top, it looks like this will be a big turn. But is that a? I think it's a Rain Razors, and is that a Premeditate?
I think it's a Premeditate. Oh no!
Oh, that's so unfortunate.
This is so This is especially like what you talked about. How we're almost a second cycle, and Brodie has used a bunch of buffs. The arrow density is just higher than the buff density. That to hit 2 buffs over here and not hit a single arrow is extremely unfortunate.
And if Brodie just passes here and doesn't fire anything, or just fires his Spire Sniping for 3 plus the 4 from the melting point, he's actually got to be worried about just falling so far behind in life that he's not going to lose to fatigue anymore. He's just going to like lose to damage and having to block out.
Definitely. And the other thing is that Spire Sniping doesn't let you put cards to the bottom. This just means that Brodie's next hand is going to be no arrows as well, because he has 3 cards remaining. He's going to put one in Arsenal and draw 2 buffs, the 2 buffs that he just saw with the Spire Sniping. So he's going to need to try and cross-wrap into an arrow, or blind Azalea into an arrow, again, to even have a chance of sending something.
Yeah, which is okay that he does need to cross-strap into an arrow. He's been on the cross-strap plan basically every turn, but all those pumps that block for 2 look really bad into this Command and Conquer.
Absolutely. And he does not, because he doesn't have the arrow, he doesn't have the out of tuning Deathsealer into an arrow, to put an arrow in. He can't just let this Command and Conquer hit and go for that line, because he just doesn't have an arrow. He needs to have a card in Arsenal to even potentially have a turn.
This Command and Conquer is actually just a nightmare thinking about it, because he has to block with 3 cards if he wants to block this. And if he doesn't block this, then he can't do anything on his turn because he has no arrows. So basically, no matter what happens here, Brodie's in a ton of trouble from this Command and Conquer.
Yep, so it looks like he's opting to use his life as a resource here. He's saying these buffs are more important to me than 6 life. He responds to the hit trigger, activating Rain Razors. Trent just goes ahead and arsenals his last card, and we know that Brodie's likely just going to be passing. Now let's see whether he... I don't know, what are your thoughts on, maybe him just playing out a buff or 2 just to increase the odds that he finds an arrow?
Yeah, I could see him pitching a buff to activate Death Dealer. Even though he can't load an arrow, he can still activate Death Dealer's ability. You aren't required to have a target. So pitching one of those buffs and keeping it in your deck rather than having them all in your hand might have been...
Can't argue with that.
might have been something that would be worth doing, though he did not. And here he's facing down the exact same situation, a Command and Conquer with 4 or 2 blocks in hand.
Yep, and he drew into a Rabble. So yeah, Trent is just not letting this nightmare stop for Brodie. He's just, he remembers back in 3 CNCs and just drew 2 of them back to back. And this time, Brodie doesn't have the life anymore to just say no blocks. I mean, I guess technically he does, but then at that point, every hammer swing is presenting lethal, so... Yep.
Yeah.
This is just... sorry, go on.
Once every hammer swing presents lethal, it's really hard for him to set up a big hand. I would be surprised to see him not block this one, even though it probably means he's in big trouble by blocking this and losing out on 2 or 3 pumps from his deck.
Yep. So he's blocking with the 3 pumps and keeping a Rabble in hand. This has honestly just been quite a series of unfortunate events for Brodie. Yeah, we've seen multiple Spire Snipings with multiple... Well, it's just several things. Just with. The Rabble does reveal a red arrow, though. Reveals a red Widowmaker, which he would have loved to cast with all those buffs that he just blocked with.
Yeah, it would have been great if he could have cast it this turn. And Brodie's deck is getting really thin. I can't tell how many cards are left in it, but when he held it there, it looked very, very short on cards. Probably like 10 to 15.
Yeah, it does look like his graveyard is taller than his deck, and Trent is still sitting comfortably at 3/4 of his life total, approximately. So Trent making a bit of a heads-up play here, leaving the Crown Prevention floating and using the D-React here, just in case Brodie opts to go for the dominated Widowmaker. Trent saying, I'm going to get his D-React out of my hand right now. Let's see whether Brodie opts to do that, which, you know, when Trent has armor up, doesn't feel like a very appealing decision. But he might be calculating the odds of him drawing like 4 arrows, given that, you know, he's been drawing a bunch of buffs in a row.
Ooh, Azalea.
Yeah, even firing it here, it's so unlikely to get any damage through. Trent can just block with the 3 block plus have the crown prevention floating, as long as he remembers to throw another piece of equipment in front of the Widowmaker so it doesn't get the +3 bonus from its effect.
Yep, you could even just throw the crown itself, because that card doesn't cost arrow.
Doesn't need to be an equipment that matters that it blocks. It just needs to block to stop the line of text on the Widowmaker.
Definitely. So it looks like Trent is at least, you know, remembering about the Widowmaker on it. He is, you know, prepared to put a rampart in front of it. Yep. And oh, it looks like he's pitching to the rampart, even though he does have the crown prevention floating. So,
Okay.
yeah, maybe just want to get that Eye of Ophidia value from you know, letting him see the top of his deck. Or maybe he was saying, I don't have much to do on my turn anyway. All I'm going to be doing is throwing the hammer. So, you know.
Yeah, if he's just pitching a big card to throw the hammer for 4, I could see just pitching the eye just because you don't want it in your hand. It doesn't block, and it doesn't really provide much in hand. So just getting it out of the hand if he can't use it to play something.
Yep. Looks like Brodie has drawn a Codex, and we did see him, I believe, block with a Codex very early on. Was it turn 0? He might have blocked with a Codex? Or I don't quite remember, but it does look like there's a Codex coming up. And maybe this can swing some tempo on his side for a little bit.
No blocks.
But of course, staring down a hammer, which is coming in for half your life total, is just not a comfortable spot to be in.
Yeah. Even if this Codex could be pretty good, but being down 4 to 28 is a very big uphill battle from here. Brodie really needs to like have a really threatening combo turn, basically involving Rain Razors and Bolton shots. And I see multiple Bolton shots in his hands, but no Rain Razors to go with it.
Yep. So he's really hoping to find a buff off of this Death Dealer.
Death Dealer.
He does have a buff in hand, so he could, you know, potentially do multiple Bolton shots. Ooh, he draws into another Codex. Now, this is something you kind of never want to have happen because playing one Codex will just discard the other. Like, multiple Codexes are very difficult to get rid of. He does potentially have the reload of the Bolton shot, but then, no, the same thing happens because then he doesn't have the extra Arsenal Zone like Lexi does. Yep.
7. 2 in hand.
Yeah, so Brodie's just firing the Bolton shot here, drawing the second Codex. There's not really a way to not discard it, right?
Yeah.
If the Bolton shot hit, he could reload 1 and Azalea it away, but if he wants to play it, he's just gonna have to, or play 1, he's just gonna have to discard the other one.
Yeah, he could Azalea it away and like pray that he hits a buff. But the Bolton shot didn't hit anyway, so bit of a moot point. He does need to discard a Codex if he wants to resolve. If he wants to resolve one of them. Trent with the red staunch to perfectly cover up the Bolton shot, leaving 1 float for the rampart if Brodie does choose to send anything else after this.
Yeah, or even for the crown, after this Codex puts a card in Trent's arsenal, he can just crown it away to get more cards to block with if he needs to.
Absolutely. So, what's the over-under on Trent bringing back yet another CNC?
I think it's almost certainly what he's going to bring.
Yep, so we've seen Trent resolve 5 CNCs against Brodie here in this game, and he's about to get, you know, yet another one into his arsenal. Of course, this one he might just crown away, but Brodie does need to choose what he's bringing back before Trent decides, so, you know, Trent might, you know, change up what he brings in based on what Brodie brings in. So it looks like Brodie's bringing in an infecting shot, and Trent might just say, you know what, this is just damage, and you are at 4, I'm just going to take CNC, and maybe I'll just leak some from an infecting shot, but you're going to be...
Not going to 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, frailty.
So they both need to discard over here.
Yeah, it looks like Trent actually just discarded another CNC.
Of course. So Brodie activating cross trap after the codex resolved, just to see whether he maybe wants to dominate something instead of sending his infecting shot without dominate. Looks like he found a Bolton shot on top. And depending on the color, it just may not be a very impressive dominate. Anything but a red is unlikely to leak anything. And even the red with Trent's 1 floating is probably just not going to be good enough. So here comes the infecting shot for 5.
Yeah, with the red Bolton shot only would just come in for 4. It would be dominated, but with the 1 floating, Rampart plus a 3 block would cover it up, or a Crown plus a 3 block.
Yep. So it's like Trent just goes ahead and blocks it all out, saying, you know what, I have this frailty on me, I'll just keep the CNC in here. And leave it up to you to maybe pressure me enough to get rid of my arsenal.
And now Brodie knowing about the CNC, he really needs the turn to be a good one. He can't just have a weak turn and just pass back to Trent. Otherwise, Trent's going to play the Command and Conquer, and Brodie will be in even worse shape than he was going into this turn. So,
yep, and it does look like he's drawn his 3rd and final codex, along with 2 remorselesses. Now, again, that's not the best hand, because you do want to find a nice spread of, like, you want to find a bunch of buffs, and then potentially like 1 arrow or just a codex, but 2 arrows and a codex. A bit of a difficult hand to make use of completely. Now we might see him give up, use the snaps here to make the most use out of his hand.
Yeah, we could definitely see snaps here.
Azalea?
So it looks like the opt hits something that he does want to play. Finds the red infecting shot, which will dominate. Although with 2 remorselesses in hand, does look like he'll be left stranded with at least a couple of cards at the end of his turn. So Death Dealer activation is still available, so we might see that snaps play into a remorseless.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, I would be a little bit surprised to see that if Trent blocks with the Rampart here, then using Snapdragon Scalers to Death Dealer your Remorseless will come in for 5, and then Rampart will be able to block for 2, plus any 3 block would cover it up. So the Crown does mean that the Command and Conquer is gone, so Brodie doesn't have to worry about getting Command and Conquer this turn at least.
Mm-hmm. Unless there can't be any more left in Trent's deck, right? Or is this?
Yep, there's 2. There's 2 in the discard now, and 1 in the bottom of the deck.
Yeah. Oh, so it does look like Brodie does opt for the snaps, despite Trent representing that the Rampart block.
Wait, take 3?
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised to see this from Brodie.
Yeah, I suppose he just didn't want cards stranded, and I suppose he just doesn't want to face a hammer swing again, because then he'll need to block with cards anyway. And he's saying, let me just cash in the snaps, maybe pressure your entire hand. Just don't send lethal at me with just a hammer. And I wonder if part of the decision was also the fact that Trent didn't cover up the infecting shot completely, representing that he is going to be potentially sending something bigger than just a hammer at Brodie. So he's saying, you know what, no, I'm just going to snaps now. And if you want to do what you were originally planning to do, you're going to take more damage.
Yeah, that's fair. Especially seeing Trent say no blocks like that, maybe Brodie is worried that Trent's just going to send a big attack, because he activated snaps before Trent actually played the sink below, so he didn't know that Trent had a defense reaction there.
Yeah. And it looks like Trent, I think, was trying to send a Glacial, undominated, but, Glacial for 8, until Brodie made that snaps line, and now he's saying, all right, I'm just gonna send the fist at you, which is lethal unless you give me, which is gonna take a card from you unless you give me cross wrap or tunic, neither of which Brodie wants to give up, especially with the tunic coming up to 3. Now, this might look like Trent is going to lose a card in hand from the Seek and Destroy, but he can layer the triggers to trigger the Blood Rot first, allowing him to pay for it before the Seek and Destroy triggers, so we're likely going to see him do that and just save another 2 life.
Yeah, that's a great point, just being able to prevent the Blood Rot with the last card.
So it looks
Trent's very, very comfortable in this game.
Definitely. Yep. So it looks like, yep, he pays for the Blood Rot and doesn't lose any cards to Seek and Destroy. And Brodie's at 1 with Tunic coming up to 3. Let's see if he can make some magic happen.
Tunic to 3.
Yeah, this is basically the last turn that Brodie has to really do something impressive. And he did get to keep a 4-card hand. But
yeah. How many Bolton shots is that in his hand? I think that's 1 he just loaded and 2 more that he just... And 1 that he just drew and 1 that he already had. And that's a Rain Razors. This could be that multiple Bolton shot Rain Razors turn you were talking about earlier, Michael.
Yeah, this is what he needs to get back in the game. So...
Okay, so he's starting with a Lace. Very heads-up play to not break the chain. Trent does have Tunic up, which means he could still go ahead and put Rampart in front of it without, pitching a whole card for it. So he's saying, I don't want to break the chain later by playing this Lace of Blood Rot later. I'm just going to play it now. So you only get 1 use of Rampart if everything goes my way. And as I say that, Trent goes ahead and pitches a card for the Staunch, so... so he pitches a card for Rampart because he had a Staunch. That makes sense. Without using his Tunic.
So looks like this Bolton shot's coming in for 9 and Trent's blocking 6. So Brodie will get 3 damage through and get the reload off the Bolton shot. Or is it a yellow Bolton shot?
I think it's a yellow Bolton shot. So it's still going to be leaking, and we'll also get a Blood Rot through. So it looks like Trent is deciding whether he... I think I see a Piece of Mind in his hand. Maybe he's deciding whether it's worth to cover this up with that piece of... Oh, is that a Fate? Ah, that's a Fate.
Gotcha.
Yep. So he does cover it up. He is losing 2 points of value, but he is denying Brodie a reload. So still a lot of value, though Brodie can always bullseye to put in another Bolton shot and follow it up with a 3rd Bolton shot.
Yeah, the downside with bullseye bracering here is it does reset the Rampart, but I think it is just his best line here.
Yep.
6.
Because without it, he's not sending anything, and then Trent will probably just send the hammer and... Yeah. Although, I mean, Trent can still block this if he wants to give up Crater Fist and that last card in hand and prevent the reload.
21.
Looks like he's opting not to. I think that is that Piece of Mind in his hand, so he actually can't block with it.
4.
Yeah, so this is good news for Brodie getting some damage through. But this was his big turn. This was what I was talking about the whole game, the Rain Razors plus multiple Bolton shots. And just taking Trent down to, I believe, 21 total plus... I guess there is no Blood Rot, just the 21 life total. That's probably not going to be good enough.
I think the Blood Rot didn't hit because Trent did go ahead and Fate with that Bolton shot. And that was the only one with the Blood Rot in it. And Brodie does draw into another 2 Bolton shots with the Rain Razor. So he, masterfully set up his pitch deck that he needed. It's just unfortunate that Trent is just too high of a life total for him to, even threaten lethal with this. And he did spread out his deck just now. I think he has 1 hand remaining before he decks out.
Yeah, I saw 4 cards left.
Yep.
So 21 damage. It's uncertain if Brodie's cards could even deal 21 damage through no blocks at this point. But
yeah, and
it's gonna go.
It's so depressing when you put it that way, Michael. It's like all the cards come back. Even if I don't block, you can't kill me. Oh man.
Yeah, because there's probably at least a couple blues left over, and it's just tough.
Yeah. So Brodie's best bet here is to Death Dealer Bolton Shot, draw into another buff. Buff the Bolton Shot, fire it, Rain Raise it, and then Bolton Shot again.
Sorry, I keep kicking your thing.
Is there any chance... I mean, we're sort of just, talking deep theory here. Is there any chance... No, I was going to say, is there any chance he tries to set up a 5-card hand, but Trent will just hammer at the minimum, and he won't have a 5-card hand, so never mind.
Yeah, I think his best bet here is pitch to the knock, activate Death Dealer, loading a Bolton Shot, drawing a Codex, and then blind Azaleaing a Bolton Shot into another Bolton Shot, so the Bolton Shot gets Dominate to make sure that hit goes through, so you can play another Bolton Shot from Arsenal.
I see. And actually, at this point, it wouldn't even be blind anymore, right? I mean, Brodie is the sort of player that will memorize his pitch deck. He probably knows exactly what's on top right now.
Yeah, sure, that is fair. Though it looks like it's probably not a bolt and shot if he's just casting this bolt and shot.
Yeah. And yep. So he's got the rain razors. Now, of course, Trent. Oh, he's just straight up blocking 6. He's saying, I'm playing around your rain razors. Trent also probably just probably knew that there was a rain razors near that bolt and shot. He's saying, no, I'll have none of your reload shenanigans. You already got your bullseye razors value. And I'm just going to stop it right here.
Yep. So Brodie can block this with a 3-block and Tunic and have one more turn, but I think this is it.
Yep. He does have that Codex, but... and I believe his arsenal is a bolt and shot. So... he could, send that and give it a go again with the rain razors and then maybe do something with the Codex, but... yeah, this is looking like Brodie's end at the top 8 here at the Battle Hardened.
Yeah. And this whole game, Trent just was in the driver's seat the entire time. A lot of the time that Brodie gave him space to try to set up something better, Trent just punished him with a command and conquer, and Brodie just really fell behind. And then a lot of Brodie's big turns too, Trent was just able to cover up with the Oasis, the Peace of Minds, and the Staunch Response is just really pulling a lot of weight, I guess, just being able to cover up most of those big attacks.
Definitely, and also the few turns where Brodie just had no arrows definitely didn't help his position there. So sorry, go on.
I was gonna say, yeah, just none of the hands really came together on Brodie's side, and then the ones that did, Trent was able to cover most of it. But
yep, and that was a blue bolt and shot. Oh no, that was it. Yeah, that was a blue bolt and shot, so it didn't get any damage through. And then Brodie. Yeah, right. Playing the Codex, and I think he just fast forwarded, saying he's gonna grab the drill shot from his graveyard and discard the one in his hand. He just fast forward and put it into his arsenal straight away. And then he gets the -1 on the rampart finally, and then draws up two cards remaining. And Trent ending off with a blue Macho Grande.
Good game.
Oh, what a game! That seemed really rough from Brodie's side.
Yeah, it's already a tough matchup for a ranger into an Oldhim that has all these defensive tools, including the ones they bring in. They brought in recently, like the Peace of Mind and Oasis, and some even blue staunches, which weren't always there. Already a rough matchup, and definitely Brodie was not helped at all by Trent always being able to punish him when he went tall, punish him when he didn't manage to pressure enough. Right, so that was our top 4 match. So Trent is going on to the finals, and we will see you in the final match. Thank you, Michael, for joining me.
Yep. Thank you for having me.
Hey everybody, as promised, we have the Pro Tour number 2 mat to give away. Now there's a pretty special story behind this one, and I wanted to make sure that I do very much give it out to someone in the community. So while I tell this story, please leave a comment in the description of this video for your chance to win this sucker. And after Pro Tour 3, let's say, I will announce the winner and ship this right out to you, no matter where you are in the world. So leave that comment below. Now, this mat is actually the replacement Ivophidia mat that LSS gifted to me when, if you remember so long ago, I lost my luggage coming back from Pro Tour Lille. So I feel like this truly is not mine to keep, since my bag was eventually rediscovered and returned to me. So I want to make sure it goes back to someone else in the community to keep on giving that gift that LSS once first gave to me in my hour of need. So hopefully none of you lose your luggage coming back from Pro Tour number 3. That was a nightmare. But for now, best of luck with your chance to win this one. Comment below. The finals of Battle Hardened Richmond is brought to you by Metal Fab Tokens, your premier flesh and blood token company. They're innovating to make the game more fun to play. Now you've seen their tokens, but that's just the beginning. On their site, they've also started to release their signature dice line and life counters, and in Baltimore, they will reveal new Metal Hero cards and deck boxes. Now, if you're serious about Flesh and Blood, you might want to follow metal fab tokens. We're back with the finals of Battle Hardened Richmond, and I hope you all have been enjoying the wonderful commentary. I know I have been there on the sidelines, absolutely loving it, but I joined these two all-stars, Michael Hamilton and Punkage, to be here for the finals. We're going to keep it exciting. We're going to count every time that sledge gets swung and take it all the way to the finish line. Guys, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, well, it's been honestly really, really fun casting these. I know the original plan was to do it remotely, but man, Ethan, I feel so bad for you. All those internet issues, like so tragic. But, you know, doing these remotely has been awesome. I've really been enjoying the community casts as well. And yeah, I'll see people at Proto Baltimore.
Yeah, thanks, Ethan, for having me. It has been great doing these online digital casts and being a part of the tournament that I didn't expect to get to be a part of. So it's been really cool being involved and seeing everything going on. So yeah, appreciate it.
Well, look, you had to let someone else win for once. And we're going to find out who that winner is. I mean, spoilers, everyone probably already knows because this tournament did already happen. But we haven't seen the game yet. So let's jump right in. And look at that, everybody. Right in front of us is the final round that I fortunately got to experience in person. You can see my head right there behind Trent on the right. But we've got Pat Eshghy, who came in at 2nd seed, versus Trenton McBride at 4th seed. They were the two Oldhims who made it in the top cut, and they're on very different versions of Oldhim, a full fatigue and then more of a defensive mid-range. But Michael, as someone who plays Oldhim more than the rest of us in this room, who do you immediately think has the edge?
So I think the defensive mid-range probably has a slight edge, including cards like Healing Balm that are commonly played in the fatigue decks are a pretty big liability in the mirror. They're basically just reds that block for 2. And your goal is kind of just to have as many cards that are impactful as you can in the matchup. So a lot of the time when you play an Oldhim mirror, you see them just like sleeving up or playing their entire sideboard. So since the games go to fatigue so often, having those reds that are not very good in the matchup can be pretty tough.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be able to ask Trent about his sideboarding decisions before they jumped into the match, because funny enough, this game was actually played on the morning of Sunday. The venue was closing on Saturday night, and both players agreed that the match might go long enough that everyone kind of signed it off that they would be playing in the morning. And so because of that, I got some extra time to talk with both players, and Trent is not running those red healing cards that take an action point. Sigil's definitely still in the list, but he doesn't want to spend an action point just healing 3. He'd rather spend that swinging sledge, right? So that's what we've actually got in the bottom left. I went ahead, gave up on the turn counter. Who cares? It's about how many times do you swing that sledge, because both players have it equipped. Obviously, apart from that, the equipment actually has a bit of a difference, with Pat bringing in Vambrace, which I didn't even know he had in his list. So when that hit the table, I immediately thought, oh, he actually has an advantage here. There's going to be perfect math that probably gets broken by Vambrace pushing over a Crown, pushing over Oasis, pushing over Peace of Mind, Earth React, right? A lot of these defensive tools that Trent has line up perfectly in a match that's all about just very finite numbers, right? So you can see that already. Pat, Vambrace, pushing a little bit. Do you think that's really going to be an impactful piece, or would you still have preferred Crater Fist?
So I really like the Vambrace here. Speaking of Oasis Respites, we've already seen both Oldhim players pitch Oasis to the bottom in their first cycle. So we know it's going to come back immediately in their first cycle. We also saw Trent pitch a Remembrance. So you know this game's going to go really long, but we already saw the Vambrace get value here. And the thing with Sledge is that, typically you're pitching 2 blues for it a lot of the times. It's, a little different in Bravo where you pitch a red and a blue with it because you're really pitch stacking those reds along with like 3 blues. But in Oldhim, a lot of times you're just pitching 2 blues with it, and then you have the one floating. If the opponent does like what Trent tried to do just now, sink into Earth React, you leak 1 without even using a card. So I'm a huge fan of this Vambrace.
Yeah, I think it might become pretty mainstay if, especially in preparation of the Pro Tour, if you're trying to play an Oldhim that beats the mirror match. I actually see Vambrace, funny enough, supposed to be the Oldhim cracker, is probably finding its home in Oldhim first and foremost, just because of how well Pat puts it on display in this game, as we've seen already, and as I saw it live. But these big high-value attacks that come through, like the Pulverize from Pat's side, are really, really key in just drawing cards out of your opponent's deck. But when they line up perfectly with what Trent just did, with a Staunch that he gets to fully pitch into, you're not getting the effective, like maybe rip 4 true cards from the deck, right? Because that's something you always have to be cognizant of in this matchup. It's not just about damage, it's about how many cards can you actually pull from each other's deck, like Michael mentioned, to get it to a true fatigue state. Is that going to be the win con, or can you set it up in a different way through not such an easy access to dominate like in Bravo, but Oak and Old is a thing, and you'd think that both versions of Oldhim are likely very capable of pitch stacking that kind of combo when the match is this slow.
Yeah, I've seen the Oldhims kind of move away from Oak and Old, or move away from playing so many copies of the card, just because without Pulse and needing these more expensive cards to swing Titan's Fist in your other matchups, it's really hard to keep your elemental count as high as it has been traditionally, which just makes fusing Oak and Old a lot harder to do. So because of that, I think we will see the game go pretty close to fatigue, if not all the way to fatigue, because again, just so little access to efficient dominated attacks or ways to even just get damage through.
Exactly. Yeah. So it comes down to like those cheeky moments where you can actually pull real cards from deck that effectively didn't do anything. Something like a Pummel landing or a Terra Sunder, right? Like if those actually land and just say, you are giving me discards without actually spending those cards, always lines up really, really big. And we see Pat on the left has the Terra Sunder in hand, but he's now facing down what could be a Pummel. So both of those things are at play. Obviously, Pummel CNC not going to line up to get full value when Crown is on the table, but still, it's about managing your exact value per card that you want. And he goes ahead and says, "Nope, we're going to go ahead, get this red Pummel to the bottom, part of a pitch stack potentially, and just deny the CNC hit effect."
And this is very interesting because CNC is coming in for 6, the same value that the Sledge would come in at, but CNC takes a card out of Trent's deck as well, because this is an attack that he's putting on the combat chain versus just swinging with his weapon. Granted, this was an arsenal, so maybe that's why he felt like he just wanted to send it out and not send it to the bottom to ruin his pitch stack. But there's an interesting thing to think about. Every time you send an offensive card, you are going -1 in deck in a matchup where your cards left in deck is almost the primary resource.
That's actually a really, really great point. There was the opportunity where playing CNC out kind of did represent the Pummel threat, but just what you mentioned, the fact that, if you don't actually have it, was that the right way to use your resources then? Because you presented Pummel threat, but still spent a card in deck. Really, really well pointed out, I'd got to say. Because, 6 is 6 damage, whether it's coming from Sledge or a CNC.
I was going to say, we did see the Pummel being represented, but not actually cast. But we saw it affected how Pat blocked that turn. He pitched a red to activate his Crown of Seeds and then just blocked with the card, making sure that he could discard to the Pummel and still be able to swing back his Sledge.
Yeah, definitely a player who's going to respect all potential plays turn by turn. Pat, I mean, we're not in a true rush because this is untimed, but at the same time, both these players did want to jump into the PTI event right after. So yes, he's definitely going to consider every play line, but we really were ticking down to the point where, if we go an extra like 30 minutes over, then there's not going to be enough time to jump into the PTI event. So as of now, no one's making like super brash plays by any means. Everyone's still taking their time deciding on Sledge swings, which we have another decision point on the table of let's pitch a blue and a red for 6 damage, while Trent thinks, do I give 2 cards for 6 damage? Do I Crown? He definitely can't do everything the same because there is a non-block with that Heart of Fyendal. So he does have to make a cognizant choice of what to do with that card. It can't just be used for across the board value.
It's quite a funny situation. He kind of wants to leak one so he can get his heart value, but I mean, it's kind of effectively the same thing. If you block 5, you leak 1, you just hit your heart in your turn, you get your life back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would have been a great turn to have an Earth Blue in his hand. He could have blocked for 3 and Earth reacted to prevent 5 of the damage and then take 1 and then gain that back with the heart and preserved a card in deck, but he didn't have the Earth card here, so.
Absolutely, and Pat also wasn't... he had Tunic up. No, he was representing the Vambrace, even if he had the Earth React. I noticed it was a Peace of Mind and a Channel Lake Frigid that he pitched. He wasn't having, a resource floating right there for the Vambrace.
So it's really interesting because in this matchup, the fact that you can get Sledge off of a 1 card plus Tunic is actually not how you really want to spend that Tunic resource, because that means you did something else with the other 3 cards in hand, and blocking with 3 cards in hand isn't necessarily the value you want to pull out of those cards, right? So instead, if you can use your Tunic resource for just, on curve Crown of Seeds, or in Pat's case, Vambrace, or in what we're seeing right now, paying for a Pulverize cleanly, that's where Tunic gets massive massive value. So Pat, this is the second time that he's getting Pulverize casted this way off the 3 blues plus Tunic. So he's got to feel really, really good about this. I mean, it's the cleanest way to do it. You don't have to heave it or anything like that. Getting them in graveyard also means that if he comes across a Remembrance, right, then he's got those really high value targets that he might want to shuffle back in. But I don't know. What do you normally look for in terms of Remembrance targets in this matchup, Michael?
Pulverize is a big one if you can do it early enough that your life total is not if your life total is not getting too low that you won't be able to keep a hand to cast the Pulverize. It's definitely one of the strongest cards in the matchup. Just coming across for 14 for 1 card in deck, it just forces your opponent to spend multiple cards dealing with it. And if it leaks any damage at all, then any attack they send back will be significantly diminished. So Pulverize is the ideal target when you can do that. Other good targets are like Rouse the Ancients is pretty good. Any of the 6 for 10s are okay, like Thunderquake or Glacial Footsteps Red, if they have access to those in their deck.
Right, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In terms of like what you're asking for in a late game situation, being able to cast Pulverize is a whole extra card in hand plus Tunic counter for 14, but potentially 18 value. Whereas if you can just slam the 3 card 10, that demands way less. It's still super relevant because if you can knock your opponent back on whatever they're able to play out, kind of knock them off the sledge hand, basically. That's really huge in a late game scenario. So I do know both players definitely are on Remembrance. I think Trent probably is on. I don't know if he brings in the full playset in this matchup, but he does run a full playset because of his Warhorn strategy into Dash and Icelander, right? But Pat is definitely not on a playset, so he's got to pick his Remembrance targets more carefully. So I'm interested to see what comes up when we get there, which is still a ways away, to be fair.
I just want to point out that Trent has an Eye of Ophidia in his hand, and he did have the opportunity there to pitch the Eye to Crown, opt 2, and then Crown and Sink to make use of the opt if he wanted to. But yeah, I'm honestly not entirely certain why the Eye is in this Oldhim list. We saw it against Azuri as well, and I guess it helps with pitch stacking as we see here. I'm honestly not entirely certain. This is some spicy tech.
So it's pretty critical to beating Dash and Icelander in finding your Warhorn faster. It is really all it comes down to. Is in those matchups, your win con as a pure fatigue Oldhim is Warhorn. So you just need to find that card. And with all the crown cycling, with the Eye of Ophidia now as the additional 2 opt, then you can churn through basically as fast as humanly possible to those cards. Because Trent did beat a Dash to actually make it into, I think that was his top 8 game before he played against the Dromai in top 4. I think I'm saying that right. But he beat a Dash in top 8, and it was almost a 2-hour game. And he won strictly off the back of being able to play Warhorn 4 times. So, yeah, it took a while. It took a while, but his whole game plan really is just find that as fast as possible and play it out.
Yeah, and that really makes a lot of sense. Sorry, go ahead.
I think it could very well be a bit of a liability in this matchup because, you aren't trying to turbo to anything here. I guess, there is some element of pitch stacking going on and pitching a threats to the bottom, but in the end, that is a no block, which unlike Heart isn't actually giving you life when you pitch it. So I do wonder whether that could really bode badly for Trent later on in the game.
Yeah, I mean, there are fringe scenarios, right, where if it's a Pulverized hand, you do just want to be able to say, okay, dump this hand, block, give it up. Because in that scenario, if you're keeping something like non-block and like one of those blue non-blocks in hand, to even try to return Sledge Tunic, that's just really bad value at that point. It only comes in for 2. So there's definitely some fringe scenarios, where it could come up. But I don't remember if we really see it punish him. There's a lot left in this game for sure. Because if anyone saw my tweet, the game ended at 43 sledge swings. And we're only at 10, folks. Only at 10. So far, I'm trying to pay attention lightly to any pitch stacks of note. And really, I mean, our Guardians get a little too easy right now with Terrace Under. I really feel like that card is just the fact that it's blue. It's so easy to slot that right into pitch. It becomes a threat. definitely later in the game because Dominate becomes that much more relevant, not to mention like in this matchup, right? The curve you're really looking for is when you see the Tear Asunder off Tunic, you can go Tear, Sledge, off Tunic, all of a sudden 3 cards comes in for 7 Dominate. I mean, it's like you build your own Anothos at that point. And if you can get that set up in second cycle, when a lot of the defense reacts are gone from the deck, that's when you can likely actually tear value and kind of set up a string of turns that are just really, really oppressive. But right now it's just something that straight damage, right? Leaking it through while Pat can. It's a pummel, no discard attached to it, but it's on curve, and it just comes in for a clean 10.
Speaking of defense reactions being gone from the deck, I do feel like Trent has used a lot more of his defense reactions compared to Pat. We've seen him use 2 to 3 staunch responses, the Sync, the Fate, also an Oasis earlier, I believe. Whereas on the flip side, Pat has used a bit more of his offensive capabilities. We saw him send 2 Pulverizers already, and I think he blocked with 2 CNCs. However, the critical difference is that the Pulverizers can be remembranced back in, whereas those D-reacts from Trent's side cannot. So it'll be curious to see how that dynamic shifts towards the late game.
Yeah, great point. I should be hard counting those kinds of things, but my notepad is far away, unfortunately. But this is definitely Trent's first Pulverize. That should be easy enough to count. Pat has played 2. Now Trent comes across with his here off the back of that Tunic turn. And that's, part of the problem when you're playing Pummel on Sledge, it's just damage, and you don't get the disruption in that could have really interrupted a turn like this. Because Trent, when he's facing down vanilla damage to be able to throw back 14 like this, you take that every time.
Yeah, this Pulverize basically evened out the life totals. So Trent looked like maybe he was falling behind a little bit when that pummel happened, but it wasn't the case. He just got to present a very strong attack of his own.
Now is a question of whether he can actually make use of this 4-card hand, which Oldhim does struggle with. We saw Pat, after his first Pulverize, he managed to follow up with a Spinal, which is, it's a tall attack. He still gets to use 3 of his cards and set up an arsenal. And we do see something similar coming out from Trent here. 7 damage dominates Sledge out here.
So here the Vambrace might actually look a little bit rough here, because Oldhim usually doesn't struggle too much covering up 7 Dominate with Crater Fist and maybe some blocking boots or an Earth React and a 3 block from hand. He can usually cover up the first 7 pretty easily, but with the Vambrace instead of Crater Fist, that's a much more challenging thing to do.
And Pat really got rewarded by the Crown of Seeds here, drew him into the Sink below, and then he already had the Earth card in hand to cover it up.
Better lucky than, never mind. Well done, Pat, covering that up. But also well articulated point, Michael, in terms of just being able to going into a matchup, like knowing the exact breakpoints you need to wait for. I'm sure Trent is also well aware that that's why he's keeping the Crater Fist untouched as of now. It's a skill that really develops the more you play Flesh and Blood and the more you experience your own deck and how it plays into every single matchup. Is, your blocking equipment really can get the highest value when you understand both sides of a matchup. It's not just about protecting your own life, it's about protecting around whatever your opponent's potential on hit is. So I really doubt we'll see Trent throw that in until that exact Tear Asunder turn that you're talking about, Michael. So as of now, Pat got maybe 2 or 3 value off the Vambrace so far. So by the numbers, you can start to see, okay, well, 3 block versus like the 3 damage push by Vambrace, that's probably pretty similar. But we'll see if the actual prevention of the on hit can kind of even that out, because Vambrace as of now, like, definitely looking like it leaked. I mean, it might have even be the difference right now in terms of where the life is at. There's been plenty of turns where pitching 2 blues into Sledge and then just using an extra floating, pay for Vambrace. I mean, that has leaked through damage to get Pat to the life total he's at now.
Hey, don't forget the other mode of Crater Fist of getting the +2 damage on your next crush effect, all right? That's 4 points of value, right? I'm just kidding, of course. It's basically 3 block in this matchup.
I've seen Kale do it before. Just saying. But in this matchup, what even says crush? What is that? Maybe Cranial Crush says crush.
Spinal Crush?
Spinal Crush says, God dang it, you catch me out like this.
I don't know if I've ever seen an Oldhim activate the activated ability on Crater Fist. I know you said you've seen Kale do it, but that's on Bravo.
Yeah, that's definitely Kale synonymous with Bravo, that's for sure. All Okay, significant in the pitch here. Actually, we see it on both players' side is the Remembrance. Unless I missed one of them maybe putting it in Arsenal and crowning it away, I think this might be the first Remembrance seen by both players. Pat has his in hand right now. Trent just pitched his. And like I said, Pat is running the 1. Trent's count I'm not quite sure about. But it seems like they're both pretty okay with kind of saving that till the second or potentially even third cycle. And as of now, just let it pitch into Sledge. But when Trent pitches into Sledge...
Trent pitched one earlier?
He did? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So when Trent pitches the 5 resources into Sledge, though, all that presents is, a wasted resource. But now we see, again, this threat of, okay, like, do you want a crown? Because I've got Van Brace and Floating. And it just comes up again and again. And I really probably going to start to see that card pop up more and more in Oldhim. I mean, Pat did win this thing, so he's doing something right.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Michael? Does that actually make the cut? Or is this just some experimentation that might have paid off?
No, it's definitely good. And especially if you're against these more fatiguey Oldhims that are really looking to activate Crown as often as possible. They're playing cards like Oasis Respite. They're playing a higher count of Earth cards to Earth React more often. Then it definitely pulls the weight. And since you're going to pitch 2 blues or a blue and a yellow a lot of the time to Sledge, it doesn't really cost you very much to have it, just missing out on that Crater Fist block.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now we see, look at that, a block with a really high value red back to back, right? That's 2 red glacials that we're now blocked with. Interesting. I wish I paid closer attention. That might have just been an issue of the hands didn't line up to have like an easy double blue to pay for those. But I know I would feel a little shaky if all of a sudden 2 of my really high statted cards were just cast away for the 3 block that even a low value blue represents. Like, does that feel like a big deal to see those thrown away, or am I misreading it, you think?
So I think that was a bit of an awkward situation in his hand, because if you look at his pitch zone right now, it's a Peace of Mind and Stodge, neither of which can block on their own, and you want to cover up that 6. So I think that's where the decision stemmed from. But Michael might have a different perspective.
Yeah, I was going to say he had 2 blues and 2 reds, so ideally you could block with one of the reds and send the glacial back. But the red is a Peace of Mind, which requires a blue to play it. So.
Interesting. Yeah, there was a lot of conversation with Peace of Mind obviously being good in Oldhim, but the red count is so tight, and Oldhim as well has those really clean curves you want to play around, like we're seeing the Glacial Footsteps here being a little impeded by the fact that Peace of Mind needs its own card to be played like right then and now. Because when you do the math that it's a 1 card block 5, the card doesn't replace itself immediately, right? It's a ponder. So we're seeing a little bit of clunk in the red draw there. But if you can fall back and still just play out a Sledge turn, I'm sure you don't hate that too much.
And here we saw Pat had the opportunity to use his Tunic and Van Brace to leak in 1/1 damage, because Trent only used a Peace of Mind to cover up 4 of the Sledge. He opted not to, and I wonder if this means he wants to use the Tunic to crown his seeds and maybe have a stronger turn or block 1 on Trent's swing. Looks like he's not doing that either.
Interesting. Yeah, it could be also a recognition that it's not a turn counter, right? So we're not exactly on like turn 10. They don't swing a Sledge like every turn cycle, but I'd say we're around like turn 13 or something. And okay, this is going to be my point. The fact that maybe he knows like kind of the ghost stack of where that last pulverizes and is likely close. Well, look at that. It was actually in Arsenal. So absolutely heads up. Like Pat knows what he wants that Tunic resource for. It's not just for 1 damage. It's to enable this 4 card like 18 kind of, right? It's crazy.
Yep, and he gets to set up an Arsenal.
The true value of the pulverize is usually somewhere between 14 and 18, because you usually don't get the full 18 because your opponent's probably not going to attack after they get pulverized. But it's definitely more than 14 because they can't play their hand as efficiently as they would like to because of the threat of the pulverized trigger. Hey,
you're talking to a Levia player who, when they see that card and then look at all their blocking equipment and then realize even Husk doesn't bail you and then you still have to throw an attack because you need to turn off Blood Debt. There's a lot of pain in those board states, tell you what. So it's just crazy to be able to see heroes that say, oh, you're throwing 14, we'll just play defensively and not explode. It's a whole different feeling.
And that right there, I think, really shows us the power of Pulverize over here. Trent used 3 cards to block out well, I mean, to block that Pulverize and still leak 2. Whereas Pat obviously only had to use 1 card in deck to send that 14. And that's a sort of mirror breaker thing that goes on in this matchup where one person, lost 1 card in deck, but the other person lost 3.
Yeah, and they're definitely running above 60, like Michael had pointed out early on. Trent's not running the pile. We haven't seen any of those red heal cards that I mentioned he wasn't running. I actually doubted my statement. I think that is now fact because it's definitely through first cycle here. We haven't seen one. So this is actually, speaking of though, a confirmed second Remembrance that is now being pitched. Too recent to that first one we saw. Third. Thank you. So there we go. That is the full count of Remembrance from Trent. And speaking to previous points that Pankaj you'd pointed out with that non-block eye, well, now you're starting to see a deck that, sure, they're not consolidated now, but you do need to find opportunities to play out the Remembrance so that you don't get clumped up into true, like all non-block hands with eye, heart, and triple Remembrance. 5 non-blocks in the deck. Compared to what Pat's probably on just the 2, the 1 heart, the 1 eye. Yeah.
The one heart and the 1 Remembrance.
Yes. Oh yes, that's it.
So Pat is able to draw. He's been able to really capitalize on the tempo in a sense. We talked earlier about how Oldhim can sometimes struggle with big hands, but we saw the previous turn he managed to send Glacial for 10. Now he's setting a Macho Grande with Dominate. So he's been really able to capitalize on having these 4-card hands. Whereas I think earlier when Trent had his, he went Terra Sunder into Sledge, but a lot of times Oldhim draws the 4-card hand that just goes Sledge, and it's pretty sad.
Mm. Yeah, so this right here, I think Pat at this point could be valuing the fact that Macho says Dominate pretty highly, because in terms of like rate of damage, right, this is pretty poor. Choosing to spend a card from deck for 8, like we like Pankaj had pointed out. The decision point there to spend an entire card where you could otherwise Sledge is normally something to think about. But I think the Dominate is just the big deal behind a card like Macho, and having the room to play it, and for whatever reason, honestly, pulling out a Crater Fist block, does that feel like a big mistake? Dominate feels pretty scary when you don't have the defense reactions, and Trent threw a Crater Fist in front of that.
Yeah, I think it was a mistake on Trent's side, because although Dominate is scary, it's not like using your Crater Fist there is stopping anything from happening. You're preventing 2 damage that you wouldn't be able to prevent otherwise, but it's basically the same as any 2 damage that you might not want to prevent for whatever reason or be able to prevent later.
Right. So it might have just been a string of decisions from Trent where, first of all, Dominate feels a little scary, especially when it's a hand you want to keep, like that Pulverize was. So just throwing the Crater Fist in just so that the life doesn't tick down too far might have just been kind of a gut reaction there. But we see Heart bringing Trent a little bit right back up. In terms of life, man, it is still neck and neck. And I think to Pat's credit, we haven't seen kind of the scary things he's got going in his pitch stack. But let me tell you, in person, the finals of this game like really came down to some amazing pitch stack. I think maybe what's happening is it's not the second or first cycle that these players are really focused about. It's really where in the game do we naturally play Sledge enough to bring our opponents down to the point where, all right, now the first real hand I can craft that lines up that does something a little bit beyond Sledge is the one I really have to start caring about. So let's just Sledge until the life is at the point where, Dominate starts to matter again. Dominate off of Terra Sunder, Dominate maybe even an Oakenol type of deal. Because as of now, it's really just parity. That's all we see.
Absolutely. And I want to go back to that Crater Fist block discussion, especially since we saw a Heart being pitched immediately after. The fact that you're running, cards like Heart and Oasis Respite, you are sort of incentivized to be lower than your opponent so you can get the max value out of those cards. So that just goes back to, I think that Crater Fist block could have just been saved for later. You sort of leave your life total on the board instead of, in your actual life total, and then you get value from your cards like Heart and Oasis.
Absolutely. Of course, Trent's also just opened himself up to Mangle, which is categorically better than Endless Winter, right? Everyone's playing it. No, definitely not. But we see another pummel come through over a Sledge here. So same deal. This is just on-curve damage. It is not doing anything to threaten that discard. But damage if Pat is setting something up to potentially have like one more big swing, I haven't quite seen what's in arsenal here, but Trent just threw 3 in front of this. Just 3. So he's taking like probably the largest chunk of damage he's been looking at all game potentially of just 7. It doesn't seem too happy about it either, because that whole hand definitely has an eye in it, so he might not have just had all the decision points he wanted in terms of what to do with this kind of hand. Did anyone else get a good look at what he was dealing with?
Nah, but it does also look like a Vambrace activation is there off the tunic in response to Trent's Crown activation there.
Makes sense, yeah. So that 7 damage really did land here. They'll probably update live tilt. Yep, there we go. So I think that might be the largest gap we've seen, and all this just to turn into a sledge turn. I mean, well, I guess you're resetting arsenal as well, so it's not the biggest deal. You're still being card efficient.
So one concern that Trent might have as his life total is getting low and low is we still see these 3 Remembrance in his deck. He needs to find time to be able to cast them to really get the value out of having them in his deck. If he's just blocking with 2 cards, casting Remembrance, and not swinging his sledge back or something, then he's just going to keep falling further and further behind. And if he doesn't find a good window, or it might end up costing him to actually cast the Remembrances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, what I'd mentioned before with having weird opportunities to swing sledge off of the tunic and blue really could line up at some point with Remembrance. Maybe that's what that 3rd, 4th cycle of tunic is doing for the deck, or rather like in conjunction with Remembrance. First cycle, it's about playing out the Pulverize. Make sure that the tunic goes to that. But then actually unlocking the ability to pitch a blue, use tunic sledge, and still mean that you had a card to potentially reset in arsenal, a card to block with, and a card that is Remembrance, starts to line up a bit better. What I'd be worried about in Trent's case is that he has 3 of them still, right? And you're not going to line it up to the point where they're perfectly spaced out, where you get tunic counter every Remembrance hand. That's not likely to happen. He's going to find him a little bit faster than that.
Here we see the power of that Ponder token from Peace of Mind that allowed Pat to send the Thunderquake for 8 instead of just sledging, and still have an arsenal. That card has been such a great addition to Oldhim lists.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, this whole weekend long, I hadn't seen anyone use the Team Covenant promos. I guess we're missing our Dagon Whites of the world. Where are all the Bling Masters of Oldhim, no Marvel CNCs on the table, no Alt Art Peace of Minds. Just ain't right. No Taiwanese Fate for scenes either. Just noticed that one.
Here we see yet another point of value coming out from the Vambrace. We should have also tracked this. Like, how many points of value did Pat get from Vambrace in this matchup? Because it's been a lot so far. Yeah. Definitely outvaluing, even if Trent uses offensive value of Creative Fist.
Okay, look, so something to mention. I'm not sure we really saw it face up at any point because Pat might have been tucking it in arsenal so that even Trent didn't know. But there is an Oakenold in Pat's hand. And, obviously having seen it live, I know it plays a pretty big factor in this game. But I was waiting to see where it naturally came up because I didn't quite remember. And this really might be a case of Pat always playing that card face down. Did you all ever see it pitched at some point? Or was it really a game of Crown and Seeds to tuck it away?
I think he did pitch it to a sledge pretty early on.
Oh, he did? Okay, never mind. But it looks like just one copy, like Michael had been saying, where it doesn't necessarily get played in multiples, but when you have Earth cards like So Tomorrow in the deck and Remembrance, unless it's somehow getting target banished, you can get a lot of mileage out of just that single copy of Oakenold.
Look at that beautiful pitch stack. He has the Ice and Earth card for this Oakenold. Yep, beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely superb. And the fact that Trent is only throwing a sledge into this, Pat is happy to, he's happy to take, that's vanilla, right? And now he's setting up a position to not only have the perfect curve to be able to play out, just pitch that one blue, Oaken, reveal the 2. In theory, he has, well, I guess tunic counter doesn't really matter in that kind of turn because you could then pitch the Earth or Ice to Vambrace, funny enough. That's now a playline that's live, right? Like Oakenold coming in for 9 and obviously having resources to pay for Vambrace. This is one of those breakpoint scenarios where missing Crater Fist could be a really big deal.
Wait, pitching this to Vambrace? You mean he can't swing Hammer after this? Oh, right. No, never mind.
We don't talk about Stormbringer. I don't have my soundboard. We're not recording that way. But plug, check out that amazing music video on Ethnic Smokes channel there. We just can't talk about it after the fact.
Definitely not.
So Trent is actually able to cover up this Oakenold with a blue staunch response kicked. So he did end up using the last block on his Crater Fist, but covering it up pretty good for him, not having to just lose 2 cards for no value.
Yeah, that's really key at this point for Pat to just understand where the defense reactions are in the deck. Blue Staunch is one of the easiest ones to just clearly pitch back in. I haven't been personally tracking, but if I had to wager, there can't be more than like one more defense react in Trent. I feel like he was so aggressively playing them out first cycle that maybe at some point, it was like a Peace of Mind and a Fate left, something like that. And actually, we do see a Peace of Mind in his hand right now. So if at some point Pat takes a look at what defense reactions are left, he will have a pretty good read on, at this point in the game, every potential playset of cards. It's not like Trent is secretly holding back a Spring-Load Somersault at this point. And this is that So Tomorrow that I mentioned. It probably always targets... Did we already see what he targeted?
Yeah, he targeted Oakenold.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if
Oakenold.
he even has another legal target. Except, I guess, Autumn's Touch, maybe? But yes, it's Oakenold with, if you look at his pitch zone, another Ice and Earth card right next to it. So Pat is really doing some masterful pitch stacking in this game.
That's beautiful. And the other side of that, right, is the Earth card that's right next to it is a So Tomorrow. So in theory, if he gets another Earth close to this pitch stack, then he'll just do it again. That's terrifying.
I think there actually is a blue Autumn's Touch right above the Oakenold, because I believe that's what he pitched to cast the Oakenold the first time on the previous turn.
Dirty. Well done, Pat. The guy is honestly pretty unassuming. He's just a really friendly dude, always happy to talk and hang out at an event, but he is cutthroat with his plays. I don't even think his body language is that cutthroat, but good Lord, is he just doing everything correctly?
Absolutely. He's got the So Tomorrows, whereas Trent has the extra remembrances. Let's see which one serves who better, which right now is looking like the So Tomorrows. Yeah,
the So Tomorrows have looked great. They've Earth reacted a couple times, and now that's the one putting back the Oakenold and also fusing to the Oakenold. It seems very strong. It wouldn't surprise me. I see a remembrance in Pat's hand here. It wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't cast it this turn, because he wants to make sure to keep that Oakenold stack he set up so well.
Right. But with that remembrance, if he does choose to hold it, like we pointed out before, he doesn't even hate the fact that he can keep it in a blue to just be his sledge for the turn, because it still leaves the one floating for Vambrace. So his entire game plan in this matchup might really be to just play that remembrance after a full playset of So Tomorrows, right? Because he's pitching so well, and he's even counting it out now to make sure, like, how many hands away is this combo? Like, he knows it's there. That's what he's counting for. Well, I guess he's also counting for just cards in deck, right? So, never mind. Multiple things going on in a Fat player's head, though, right?
26. Okay, so I'm up by a lot of cards. Okay.
I suppose if he's wondering whether, the Oakenold stack is so far away that he might as well just cash in his remembrance now, his one-off remembrance now. I wonder if that's something an Oldhim player ever thinks about, since that is his only copy of remembrance. If he pitches it now, by the time he gets back to it, how many cards will he have left in deck?
That's a great point. And his hand actually, I think, might be able to play a bit differently as well. I don't think he ever does it, but there's a world where... oh, okay, never mind. I didn't see the staunch in there. I was going to say maybe he pitches Remembrance plus Tunic for like a Rouse turn, but it doesn't look like that was possible. But decision's made. He goes ahead and just puts Remembrance right after the Oakenold stack. So we'll see if he has enough life to really work with all that. It seems to be a bit of wishful thinking, because he is at 11. I mean, that's 2 turns where he doesn't get to just say, yes, take Sledge, right? Like he is within 2 turns of Sledge dead. So that's two like hands of the game where he is going to be forced to interact. Not to mention if Trent pulls off something more significant, like shuffling back in those pulverizes at any point and making that his turn. It feels like Pat's he's pretty fragile, honestly. It looks great, but does he get there? Because the deck is still so large. It's not like it's just a couple hands away.
Absolutely. And over here, we see a curious decision by Trent. Early on in the game, we saw him Earth reacting and then taking a damage from Vambrace, but here we see him block with that Autumn's Touch. I think he's finally realized his life is too low and he doesn't want to take damage from Vambrace anymore. He's just going to cash in that 3 block right there, but lose it from his deck.
Yeah, I mean, he's not chock full on Earth cards. I don't think we've seen any of the 2-block Earth cards in his deck, but he still might just be making the decision that he doesn't need all 3, and he can block for 3 while it's on the table. This is that curve that I was mentioning before, where now Remembrance is this kind of extra card that Tunic allows off a Sledge curve, where now just pitching 1 with the Tunic resource, that last card in hand, I mean, Pat should be pretty aware that it's not pummel in this kind of situation. Like, Trent's not built his deck that way, it seems. I don't think so, right? Have we seen a pummel from Trent? No.
No, we haven't.
So, yeah, I want to say no, yeah.
If it was pummel, we probably wouldn't see Trent use the Tunic counter here, since 2 blues cleanly pays for Sledge plus pummel. It's usually a more efficient way to play it.
Yeah, super true. So Pat can probably pretty easily call that one of those cards is Remembrance at this point. And it's not like Trent has a pitch stack that he's really put together that can match what the Oakenold is doing for Pat. So that Remembrance is likely shuffling in. I don't know. I haven't even seen those 3-card 10s in Trent's list. So maybe he feels like the Remembrance isn't going to pull through the value that he wants to get out of it. Because if he shuffles in those Pulverizes, is Trent really in a spot to be able to keep a full hand like that? It's tough. I feel like both of them are a little bit lower than they expected to be at this state of the game.
It is definitely quite a tough call trying to decide with Remembrance in. So let's see what he picks here. Also, speaking of instance that he can play, off of Tunic, Blue, and Sledge, have we seen all 3 sigils?
Yes.
I want to say we've only seen... Oh, we've seen all 3? Okay.
I believe so. Well, I snap say yes, but I just be totally wrong. There was one very early. There was one some point mid game, and there was one that I remember specifically. Okay. So I think that accounts to 3.
So he shuffled in 2 Pulverizes and a Macho Grande.
Makes sense. Macho Grande being like another Tunic enabled play, coming in for Dominate, potentially sealing things off, right? It's a good call over a 3rd Pulverize. I don't think he's ever putting himself in a world where he even plays out the double Pulverize, right? It's really, let's put 2 in so that I can probably block with 1 and still have room to play 1. And then the Macho is likely what he uses to close the game. So if that's kind of his thought process, then 3 Remembrance does feel like a bit of a liability still, because he's only played the 1 out. And we see him still with Heart, Eye, and double Remembrance left in the deck. That's a lot of non-blocks to get out. And I don't even think the Remembrance are necessarily going to get full value. It seems like he was pretty poignant with those choices of, that this is what I need to line up and potentially win the game. Because even with just a tiny bit of a life lead, if he can disrupt what Pat has going with the Oakenold stack with like Trent's own Pulverize or something, then that's kind of his win con right there. Pat's put all his eggs into this being how I actually win this matchup, whereas Trent is still just on full value grind, right? And if it comes to just we're swinging weapons at each other, whoever has more life, I guess accompanied by cards in deck is going to win. So then maybe that's like a full circle conversation where if that's how Trent wins, then Remembrance is putting cards back in deck. Oh my God, I get it, Trent. Okay, I understand. 3 just seems like a lot. 3 does just seem like a lot. Maybe 2. I don't know.
It does feel like it's creeping into the area of being a liability.
Yeah, and you talked about Trent having Eye for those other matches where he was wanting to Warhorn them over and over again, the Dash and the Ice Center matchup. And I think the 3 Remembrance is probably more because they're so good with the Warhorn, you really need to find it after you Warhorn, than because he actually really wants to have a 3rd copy in the mirror. I think it might just be he'd rather have 2, but it's better than not playing a card in that last slot.
Makes sense, yeah. I guess if it came to it and, Pat isn't setting up pitch stacks like this and it is just Sledge forever, which Pat obviously is going above and beyond that, then, at any point in the early game, Trent would have just had room to say, okay, my deck is, +2 over you. So a bit of flexibility for sure. This is juicy,
is
though.
The worst feeling. When your opponent pitches hard and they are exactly 1 life below you, it is heartbreaking on the other side.
Well done. I just was going to say it was juicy. I didn't even catch that. Just the fact that everything lines up to just threaten Vambrace like this is so wonderful. Because you see Trent, like, instinctively, I'm going to crown. Like, as an Oldhim, like, you're just in that seat, okay, crown. Right? You've got time to do these things. But now, Pat leaves the 1 floating in a situation like this, and he just says, okay, like, you cycled a card, but you didn't block any damage. Crown is now a fair card. Like, look, it just happens right then and there.
I think part of the reason to crown there was also because he had this peace of mind. So it's just, efficient use of resources, gets a cycle a card out.
Right. I just think at this
leaking
point,
one day, he's not happy about that.
if we had counted specifically the Vambrace uses, I think that's really putting us close to maybe like 6. If I had to guess, that kind of feels like the gut right number. Which at that point, with Crater Fist off the table, right? I think there's almost a clear answer that the Vambrace is just highly outvaluing Crater Fist.
Yeah, that's definitely the case in this game. Pat's gotten so much value out of it. We've seen it so many times, probably 6 times. I think that was the right number. So
now, to be fair, this is like 5th cycle, so 6 uses in a game that's already this long isn't like a ton, but it's just, look at the board state, right? Crater Fist was 3 life. Vambrace was 6. Like, that's just crazy. And it's still there for the future potential, right?
Exactly. And potentially later on, it could even be used for defense, if, say, there's another case of, say, an Oasis or Peace of Mind. Like, say, Oasis, you could pitch a full blue Crown, Vambrace, and Oasis.
Jesus, was Vambrace just an Oldhim card this whole time? Like,
it is being used against Oldhim, right? So it is to beat Oldhim.
It is, yes. It's for the Oldhim to beat Oldhim, because every other hero is like, I don't want to pay 1 for Blade Break Vambrace, and Oldhim's like, it's part of my curve. Like,
it's for Oldhim, against Oldhim, by Oldhim, all the stuff.
Boy, probably just a younger Oldhim in the card art too. Honestly.
In defense of Crater Fist, it did actually prevent the Oakenhold hit, which would have been worth 2 extra cards if the Oakenhold went through earlier. So it's not. I think Pat's definitely ahead, and I think Vambrace has been a big part of it. But I would say that if Trent hadn't been able to cover up that Oakenhold, he'd be in a lot of trouble right now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, that's definitely right to
love
point
how
out.
Quick these two are playing. Yes. Yeah.
that was funny. That caught me off guard there too. Pat, like, he probably just knew the Pulverized was even there. He's watching stack. Who knows what's going on? He was ready to just dump 4. But at the same time, that wasn't the 4 cards that he was looking for. This is the 4 cards he was looking to have. So imagine if that lined up even just a little bit differently. Would he so quickly just drop the 4? Because this is the Oakenhold hand, right? You got to wonder, like, did he... There's no way he, like, lined it up in counter of a Pulverize in the stack. Like, there's no way, right? But that looks so clean.
I don't know. Pat's played this game extremely well, and his play has been very impressive all around. I think it's possible he did plan this.
That'd be insane. I don't know if I can give him all that credit. I want to, but I think the Remembrance Shuffle kind of just randomized it to the point where, Pat might have assumed, okay, at some point I'll face down a Pulverize. He just didn't know it was like that exact turn. It just lined up this well, because boy, oh boy, dang, it's looking good. And now Pat's in the point where even if we look back like 6 turns ago or whatever it was, he was at maybe like 12 or 11. And I made some comment that he doesn't have the opportunity to take 2 sledge turns. Well, he's still in the position to take just 1 sledge turn. And if this is the turn that then wins him the game, I mean, you do it. So I think what is he thinking about then? Is it the chance of pummel? Is that...
So
I think he's thinking about D-reacts, but Michael, you go. You're the Guardian expert.
His top card of his deck, I believe he knows, is the Sotomaro here. So I think he's thinking if he should block with 1 card here and activate Crown of Seeds on his turn, and then use the Tunic to actually cast the Oakenhold. That way he doesn't take 3 damage.
Oh, wow. You're absolutely right, though. It is the Sotomaro, because we know that came right there in the stack. So, well, really, really heads up. I mean, I would put it on Pat to actually remember this. But, that's the kind of blunder that if you don't play that correctly and, just say, yes, I'll take 6 when you had the opportunity to just take 3. I mean, we're starting to become a game of inches here. We're getting to the point where, a single sledge swing is potentially lethal. So we'll see if he makes that play. He's definitely taking a look at defense reactions like you'd mentioned.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's the other consideration, because when you try and take damage to make a pivot in the Guardian Mirror, and the opponent has the D-react to counter you, that feels terrible. Like, you start to fall really far behind when you make too many pivots like this. So I think he's trying to figure out how many defense reactions Trent even has. And actually, the Remembrance kind of working in Trent's favor here, because Pat can't rely on knowing Trent's pit stack anymore because it was all shuffled. So he just needs to go by the numbers and try and see what the likelihood is.
It gives him a bit of a mental break at that point. You see Remembrance played? Okay, forget it. don't have to think about what your stack was anymore. But from him thumbing up the cards here and just counting through, I think what we're seeing now is all the staunches, all the sinks, definitely. I think it might be a 2 of Oasis that is maybe the question in Pat's mind here. I definitely don't see 3 Oasis. I see 2 ? And maybe
there is also
only
the Ironhide boots that Trent still has up, so he'll still need to keep that into account.
Oh, it is triple Oasis. I just saw the third one thumb through. Dang it, I wasn't counting every other defense react then. But Pat seems to be pretty happy with this. So he must have found the answer he was looking for, which I think is no defense reacts left. I mean, we see Trent. Oh shoot, actually, I didn't see Trent. Did someone see what he just arsenaled? Yep. It didn't look like a red.
I did not.
Dang it.
Counter on Tunic.
Oh, but he doesn't make the play that Michael, you mentioned, of blocking 3. Interesting.
Old.
Maybe
his arsenal here is not a pummel, right?
I only remember him playing 2 out. He pummeled a sledge twice. So that there's a world where that is the case. But I have not. I cannot recall on that front.
That would absolutely be brutal, and that just plays perfectly into the cost curve of the Vambrace as well. You pitch a blue for pummel plus Vambrace.
Oh my god, Vambrace! So good. Maybe Pat's not putting it on himself to remember that it's So Tomorrow next specifically. Like maybe in his mind he just knew he set up the Oakenold, and like that's the little memory tick he has is Oakenold is next to Earth Ice. And it's not so much that Oakenold is next to this Earth, this Ice. So maybe he's just missing that it's the So Tomorrow next card. Could be a way that he's thinking about it. I definitely like shortcut those kind of things where it's like this is my Oakenold hand, but not necessarily this is the exact Earth and Ice in an Oakenold hand. That could be it. And to be fair, if he's wrong, and it's not So Tomorrow, then he kind of throws the game. But Michael, you know it is. I'm gonna put it on you that it is. We'll see next hand.
So looking at Trent's hand, I don't think he has a way to cover this at all. Well, I mean, he did pitch an Earth card here for the crown instead of saving it for the Earth react, so maybe he does have it, and I'm not able to see his hand clearly, but that is a curious decision. If he doesn't manage to cover this up and he does an Earth react, then that pitch crown be a bit of a blunder.
Well, you got to remember, it's not just covering it up. It's covering up +1 because of Vambrace. Right? Like in this situation, if it's not defense react, you're getting to the cover-up value by things like crown, by things like Earth react. Right, so does the math check out? I mean, like Earth React Crown is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Like without a defense react, committing Ironhide and Tunic is the 9 right there. So I don't think there's a world where he can actually get to 10 anyway. Because of Vambrace, dude. Because of Vambrace.
He does have the other Earth card in hand, so.
Yeah. I'm not trying to like inspire Oldhims to also add Reinforce the Line to their lists, but just saying, like, where's that extra copy of defense here, Trent?
I will crown.
Funny enough, Rampart would have done it too. Forget Sledge.
Let's see what he draws. Is it the So Tomorrow? It is the So Tomorrow.
It is the So Tomorrow. Oh, Michael confirmed to win the Pro Tour. You heard it here first.
I will activate Vambraces.
On Riptide.
On Riptide. You really heard that here first now. No one else is saying that.
Down to 5. Okay.
I am not going to say anything about that.
Stats officially leaked. All the secrets.
So Trent at least able to, not sink 2 cards at bottom from the Oakenold on hit. He's, using the Remembrance out here. But still does not feel good to go down to without an arsenal, without any equipment.
No, I mean this is massive, and from what Pat set up, whether he remembered in the moment or not, he definitely like dug for the card because I guess there's no reason not to in that situation. But now he's got to be thrilled to see that it's the So Tomorrow right here, right now. He's got all the freedom in the world to put that in arsenal and try to set this back up again. Man,
and Trent's definitely sad he can't Remembrance back in defensive tools.
Yeah, so now we see the switch in what Remembrance is targeting. Now it's just going to be high-value blues. Nothing built around Tunic counter because it's gone. Like, Tunic counter is never going to be a thing again, which, I mean, that almost gives up the game. I don't want to, like, say that just outright, but the fact that you'll never be able to cleanly use like that third remembrance in the type of position that we mentioned, where Tunic Counter kind of opens up the curve to use remembrance freely without a huge punish. Like, you just don't get that anymore. The last Pulverize that's in the deck can't be used anymore. The Macho Grande that's in the deck can't be used anymore. The Terra Sunder, like clean sledge line, like can't really be used anymore. And I mean, the baked in one, right? Crown. You don't get the free crown cycle off Tunic anymore. So it's just massive to lose that here. Just incredible.
Yeah, and he gave up the Tunic, and it wasn't even able to prevent the Oakenhold from hitting him.
Right.
It makes me wonder if maybe if he knew about the Van Brace, which it's just sitting there in play, maybe he just should have kept the Tunic there.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point, right? It's not like the Van Brace is hidden information. Pat very clearly had the resources to pay for it. So I guess Trent is probably just wrong to block with that there, because the only reason to do that is to just hope Pat forgets to Van Brace. Which, I mean, this man was built to Van Brace. There's no way he forgets it.
It does look like he doesn't have enough power in his hand to activate his rouses. I think I see a blue Winter's Grasp and a blue Chokeslam.
Hey, don't sound too sad about that. You know how many freaking Guardians just slam rouses? Oh, no, thank you. Oh, reveal Pulverize. Rouse 7 go again. Oh, my God.
So we might see him finally use his Remembrance and probably just swing the sledge.
Right. Yeah, this is quite a large hand, right? To really do nothing. It's
especially
not,
on the back of an Oakenhold hitting.
Yeah, I mean, it's just huge. I'm not quite sure, like, threat-wise, what was really capable of enabling that hand. I guess he had the Rouse, right? So it's just any high attack blue would have done it. In a... Oh, God, he seems... Oh, you know what? Oh, I remember this live. He's upset because he should have remembranced before Crown. That's what it was. That was the misplay. I remember this. Yeah, he crowned after having Remembrance already in hand. So if he's going...
He played the Sotomorrow.
Oh, he's Sotomorrow. Yeah, he's Sotomorrow.
If he played Remembrance first...
No, that's what I meant. Just before the draw itself. If he Remembrance first, then he can shuffle in the threats to trigger Rouse. Is why he kind of did the harumph there. That was just the better play. Because now we see this full hand not do more than just sledge itself. Whereas, what changes if now you're shuffling in these high power blues, right? Why not add them to the deck, get that shuffle in, then draw, and have a better chance of triggering Rouse? You have all the room in the world. You just need to use that to do something beyond sledge, and he just can't.
And I think this goes back to what Michael was talking about earlier about these sort of elemental cards, these ice and earth cards like the Sotomorrows, the Winter's Grasp, and the Autumn's Touches. When you aren't fusing with them, they are kind of just mopey, and they just don't really do anything. Like, he has an ice attack in his hand, can't even turn on his Rouse. So there is a bit of a drawback to relying on an Oakenhold sort of endgame.
Yeah, if this Winter's Grasp was any of the big Guardian attacks at blue, the Rouses would be on, but he also would not have been able to fuse the Oakenholds 2 times so far this game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
a plus here and a minus there. Kind of.
Yeah, so same deal. There was double Rouse left in deck here too, which starts to feel awkward. If he didn't find room to play those out early game, I really doubt, especially at 3 life, you find another turn beyond this exact one to really play out a Rouse. It demands too much in terms of card keep, right? So now they're just a 2-block blue in the deck that's non-elemental. Probably going to start to feel pretty bad.
Absolutely. It goes back to what you were talking about how many sledge swings he could take before he needs to start blocking. And yeah, he's at the point where he can't take any more sledge swings for stuff like big Oakenholds, Pulverizes, etc. Or Rouses.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's bought himself room for Heart to still claw himself back up. It's impossible now to get to the point where you can just say no blocks to a sledge still, because the highest he can go from here is just back to 5. But to find room and get value there is still a pretty big deal, because 3 was dangerous. 3 meant I can't 1-card block. But now there is a world where he totally could.
There's some interesting tension here between these 2 decks. Trent, obviously has the eye and has the 1 more Remembrance, so there's a couple more no blocks than Pat, but Pat does have more 2 blocks in the form of those Rouses and those Sotomorrows. So it's an interesting dichotomy between these 2 decks.
Mm-hmm. Wow, speaking of Yeah, some of like the awkward cards left. I didn't know there was an Oasis still in there. That just kind of like secretly snuck into this pitch stack. I mean, hey, it gets value here, so why not? Like, it effectively blocked the full 6.
Once again, Pat at the 1 life below Trent, getting value from his Oasis, and previous turn getting value from the heart as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so there was actually a bit of a skip in the video there because there was a judge call that lasted. Hey, you're lucky I edited that sucker out. That was like a 30-minute judge call about life discrepancy. They were wondering what was. I had to stop the whole stream. I had to go back, show the judge the VOD, and we went and tracked like 3 or 4 turn cycles of damage to make sure, where everyone was at. It was a long judge call, and boom, magic of editing, it's gone.
It was just a flicker, yeah. That was
just
real
a flicker. Just a flicker.
Like the eye is back in Trent's hand here.
Eye plus
and a remembrance.
Mm-hmm.
Does not be feeling good about that.
And this is a position where Trent, I mean, he goes low, but the value from the life gain is kind of already, I mean, it's said and gone on Pat's end. He healed his 2. And that was really, really important life because it got him above 3. 3 being the danger zone, right? Where 1 card sledge block just doesn't work. And you don't get to keep like any kind of 3-card hand ever again. So Trent now is in that position himself.
If you're Trent, are you furiously using the eye to dig to your heart to try and catch up on some life while you're below?
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I was going to say. Is going to 2 specifically. It's if he can find the heart, like pretty much now, he's likely to go to 3. But I doubt he goes back up to 4. But that's the number that really matters, right? Is just get above 3. So he's definitely trying to do that. Oh, but do you even get there? Do you even get there when Tunic enables this kind of curve? Oh boy.
Yep.
No one's answering, so I guess you don't get there.
At least it doesn't need to worry about a Vambrace over here, but I don't think he has the defensive tools.
Look at that. Yeah. Just the bump. Pat, getting the back rubs. I mean, the man deserves it. See, when I tweeted that this was actually a very entertaining finals, I mean, I was glued to my seat, mostly because I was counting sledge swings, to be fair. But now being able to go back and analyze it a bit more critically with, help, obviously, kudos to you all for enabling my little hamster brain to catch up and follow all these amazing plays. I mean, truly, what a masterclass. That is a finals-worthy game. I mean, that's like Pro Tour-worthy game right there. Caught at this Battle Hardened.
That was beautiful, definitely. It's just a masterclass of pitch stacking from Pat's side. That was extremely entertaining to watch.
And I think, Michael, you called it correctly before we even saw the game play out. You did put it a little bit in favor of that defensive Oldhim. Has anything about your evaluation of that matchup changed, having seen it? Or do you attribute like the win to Pat? Is it Vambrace? Like what really took him across there?
Yeah, I think there were a lot of things that kind of went together to lead to Pat winning. I think Pat played extremely well. He set up the Old, he set it up again. And even when he made the small mistake with the remembrance, he knew it right away. Pat's just like, I was very impressed watching Pat play this game. And I think that the Vambrace was good. It looked great. It probably was worth 7 or 8 life. And it critically pushed through the Old in a spot where it wouldn't have gotten through otherwise. So I think those 2 were the biggest things. The offensive versus defensive versions of, the defensive versus the defensive mid-range versus the fatigue version of Oldhim. Since neither player really was running out of cards in their deck, I don't think it actually mattered that much, the difference in their individual card choices, so much as like Pat just played extremely well. The Old was great. The Vambrace was great. And I said the card choices didn't matter, but there were some that I just listed that mattered. But it didn't actually end up going to fatigue. So
let's be clear, both players played amazingly. I got to hang out with pretty much no one that weekend. I was so busy, but in the quick exchanges I was able to have with people, I got to say, 2 amazing players made it to the final table. Trent is a really, really amazing person. Even though he plays Fatigue Oldhim, even in Swiss, I mean, screw that guy. But also he's awesome. And he jumped in and actually cast, I think it was round 1. So a huge shout out to Trent, a great player. Pat, who I've known for a long time. I wish we could have gotten drinks, my friend. It was so good to see you again. But I mean, at all these friendly faces and the Pro Tour coming up, it's just going to be a part. I can't wait to see you guys. It's going to be so much fun. So I hope you all enjoyed it, viewers at home, fellow casters. This was just an absolute pleasure, and I hope we can do more of this. Right? It's really, really cool thing to bring to the community, get these games on camera, because you don't want to miss finals like that, even though it's just an Oldhim v Oldhim. But you also don't want to miss like a Reinar winning a calling. Right? Let's make sure that doesn't happen again. Right?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. There we go.
You also don't want to miss these games when it's 2 weeks before the Pro Tour and you're trying to figure out what to play.
Absolutely. Yeah. But maybe someone could have like paid me to not stream it, keep all the text secret. I would have done it, honestly. But now the games are out there. People are going to study, going to see some amazing things from this run of events. And they're going to see all our beautiful faces as well. So,
I mean, you're just going to bring Levia anyway. So, well, it's just lost on you, man, Sand.
I'm losing all my subs. They're not really here for the streams. They're here for Levia. And let me tell you, I can't touch that.
You're jumping
right
ship.
Oh yeah, long overdue. So I mean, we'll see pretty soon. What am I playing at the Pro Tour? What's Michael playing at the Pro Tour? That's more important.
Riptide.
Who cares about me?
What? He told us already. It's Riptide.
I said I cannot divulge that at this time. I also am not positive what deck I'm playing.
Oh boy,
which is not great.
Well, look, Michael, I'll let you go then so you can get back to testing. But don't test draft too much. I need you to be on like kind of my playing field for those. Okay. So with that, guys, it's been so much fun. Thanks for joining me. Any last shout outs before we sign off?
Well, shout out to you. Honestly, thank you for recording these games in that sort of, in the conditions that you had to. Shout out for doing this to community, and thanks for having me on.
Not to echo Punkage, but yeah, thank you, Ethan, very much for running this and setting this all up. And even after it didn't work out where you could not stream the event, thanks for making this all happen.
Well, it was a huge community effort. A lot of people really jumped in. So once again, shout out to all the sponsors and the community and you all and the viewers. And let's just keep having fun with Flesh and Blood because it's a darn good game, brought us all together, and I can't wait for more. See ya.